Councilwoman Rumble, if you could lead us in the pledge, please. Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I have to say it's a pleasure, Mayor. Sorry.
Roll call, please.
Councilwoman Carumba.
Here.
Councilman DeWitt.
Here.
Councilman Slakta. Mayor Simmons.
Here.
Councilman O'Flynn. Councilman Gibson.
Here.
Councilman Forbes.
Here. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. We're here for the second reading and the following ordinances. Audrey?
Thank you. We have one case today. I'll read the title block into the record. And that is a zoning ordinance of the City of Bonita Springs, Florida, considering a request by Horizon Park Investments, LLC, to rezone from Commercial Planned Development, CPD, and Tourist Commercial, CT, to CPD, providing for a maximum of 150,000 square feet of commercial floor area and 150-room hotel or 145-bed assisted living facility located at the southwest intersection of Bonita Beach Road and Hunters Ridge Boulevard, southeast quadrant of Bonita Beach Road and Interstate 75, providing for an effective date. This is second reading of the ordinance. At this time, I need to swear in witnesses. Please raise your right hands. Okay. Do you swear or affirm testimony you provide today is the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes. I do.
Thank you. So let me just talk about who's previously been tendered as an expert.
Yes.
So we have Jackie Genson, who's been previously tendered as an expert in land use and planning. Dan DeLisi, he also has been previously tendered as an expert in land use and planning. Ms. Montgomery, you were sworn in, but either that or as an officer of the board, I would just expect you.
Everybody has different philosophy. I don't want to run into trouble.
Okay. Michael Liggins, you're a civil engineer, and you've been previously tendered as an expert in civil engineering.
Ted?
Huh? I know Ted Treesh. He is also a engineer, and transportation planning is his expertise. And then you have Drew Fitzgerald, who's a civil engineer, who's also been tendered as an expert in. You have been tendered as an expert in this jurisdiction, right? In engineering. We have Stuart Smith, also a civil engineer, tendered as an expert in engineering. We have Michael Kirby, who's been previously tendered expert in environmental planning. We have Tom Ross, and he is also a civil engineer and transportation planner for City of Bonita Springs. We have John Dulmer, who's been previously tendered as an expert in land use and planning. And we have Jay Sweet, who is the city surveyor, has been tendered as an expert in surveying, but also in land use and planning. And I believe appraisal? No, okay, in those categories. I always he has a couple of different things, so get nervous there.
And we just had one addition. I don't know.
No.
Yeah, just checking.
If you don't know, this is Leah Fontanez.
I know, just checking.
Leah's my
But other than
assistant.
that, other than Leah, I think everybody out there was sworn in, I think.
Everybody's been sworn in and tendered as experts with exception to the applicant, the owner, and thank you. I think she's embarrassed now. And at this point,
I created your opening. See, that's what I was doing.
at this point, the applicant, we could have Jackie give you a pretty brief procedural history of the case if you'd like, and then Ms. Montgomery can proceed with her case in chief. We also have on the phone now, or will have on the phone available if you have questions, Terrell Arline, and he is also Special Land Use Counsel for the City of Bonita Springs.
Okay, great. Is he on the line now? Yes. Great. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Terrell.
Jack, yeah, has he been sworn in, Audrey?
Lawyers don't get sworn
Okay,
in.
just checking.
Everybody else did.
I'm easily influenced this morning.
Lawyers are officers of the court. They are
Okay.
expected to always tell the
We can
truth.
get just fired, so we have to tell them.
All right. Jacqueline, good morning.
Good morning, Council. My name is Jacqueline Genson, for the record. Just to give you a brief summary of the case, this application was filed with our office last year and was processed through our Land Development Code, Chapter 4, under Plan Development Rezoning Applications. The project was found sufficient and therefore scheduled for public hearings. The application was scheduled before the Zoning Board last month in April, where the zoning board did recommend approval. It's a three-part motion, and we'll go into more detail on the discussion that took place at the zoning board, as well as each motion in staff's presentation. At this time, the applicant will go first with their presentation, followed by staff.
Good morning, Neil Montgomery for the record. And I believe that you are all provided a copy of the transcript with the packet that came to you, but for the record, I'm going to introduce a copy of the transcript to the clerk. Jackie didn't mention it, but I did want to note that the staff recommendation in this case was for approval. The zoning board recommendation was for approval. The zoning board added 3 conditions, and so that prompted me to want to indicate that when the zoning board recommends conditions that are different than the staff, it's supposed to be based on competent, substantial evidence. And in this instance, on the issues that they raised, the staff and expert testimony and the applicant's expert testimony were in agreement, and there was no one from the public, so there was no expert testimony or lay testimony or evidence of any kind that warranted the 3 conditions that the zoning board recommended, and we'll talk more about that later. To orient you, the property in question is the southeast quadrant of I-75 and Bonita Beach Road. The eastern boundary is Hunters Ridge Boulevard, and you might notice that this isn't a rectangle. It's not a rectangle because of the limited access right-of-way. Later, you're going to hear some discussion about frontage on Bonita Beach Road. But for that corner that you see, the northeast corner, the property doesn't abut Bonita Beach Road. It abuts the limited access right-of-way. So that is controlled not by the county, not by the city, but by FDOT. We're here to rezone the property. The property already has zoning. It has CT zoning, which is commercial tourist, and it has a CPD where the master concept plan was allowed to vacate. But the uses that have been approved and are approved on the property are consistent with what we are requesting here today. So we're asking to go from 2 zoning categories to a CPD. If you take a look at this picture, it kind of highlights the point I just made. You see the yellow outline, and you see the distance from this parcel to I-75. Again, that's because of the limited access right-of-way. The CT, commercial tourist uses, serve the traveling public. They are hotels, restaurants, business services, personal services, and a variety of retail uses. This is your future land use map, and I want to spend some time on this, and Mr. Jalisi will spend more time on this, but this property is in the Interchange commercial land use category. When I read that, it says, this area is intended for uses that serve the traveling public, such as automobile service, gas stations, hotel, motel, restaurants, and gift shops, and a broad range of tourist-oriented general commercial, light industrial, commercial office, and multifamily residential up to 10 units per acre. So while I understand that there are some locations in the city where you want to create a more pedestrian-friendly atmosphere, this, under your comprehensive plan, is the area that's supposed to serve the traveling public. You want to serve the people in cars, and for those people who just want to get off and get back on, you want to serve them quickly and conveniently. You don't really want them driving on Bonita Beach Road well into your community if they don't have to. You want to serve those needs. Go to the restaurant, go to the gas station, get what they need, and get back on the interstate, because you don't want them creating more traffic on your roadways when they don't need to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jalisi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
For the record, Dan DeLisi, I'm a land use planner. I want to walk through I'll start out by apologizing. The length of this presentation is probably a little longer than I'm used to at a city council meeting. There was a late filed condition by staff that has really caused us to put a little bit more into this presentation than I probably otherwise would have at city council. So I'm going to go through compatibility, talk about the typical things we talk about with the zoning, but then I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about this property specifically, this area east of I-75 in the Bonita Beach Road vision. So please allow me your indulgence with that. I will start out by saying with this future land use category that Neil just talked about, the commercial interchange, when it says serving the traveling public, it's clearly referring to the automobile. Your comprehensive plan envisions the interchange as being a very unique area within the city of Bonita Springs. You only have one of those, and it's for these auto-centric uses. And that's something that the zoning board also agreed with in their discussion. They talked about this area being an auto-centric property. Let me review the master concept plan. We have 6 parcels on the master concept plan. We have tried to construct this master concept plan to relate to the property to the east. We've aligned the access roads. You can see the, north is to the left. So you can see the southern 2 most access roads connect to the Burnwood MPD, which is to our east. And I'll talk about compatibility in a moment, but just note that we've located the preserve area as one solid contiguous preserve area on the south side in proximity to the Hunters Ridge community, as well as the lake with a pedestrian path around the lake contiguous to the Hunters Ridge community. So the idea was to keep compatibility by separating the uses from Hunters Ridge and provide that natural buffer to uses that would otherwise create compatibility concerns and yet connect to the uses that are of similar nature. Just a note about the preserve, typically we try and create contiguous preserve areas for habitat reasons. It's really not in the best interest of the environment to spread out your preserve over a larger area if you can create that contiguity. So that's what we've done in this case. We have understood through the Bonita Beach Road visioning process and through our discussions with staff that this is a parcel that that is in many ways a gateway into the city, and it is the vision of people we have heard from that this be developed in an attractive manner that welcomes people to the city and that you all and this developer can be proud of. So we recognize that. We've put together some architectural exhibits to talk about the types of architectural features we would be looking at, including roof articulation, window treatments, facade materials, and we've done this for both the hotel property and for the entire commercial development. So we have spent a little more time talking about architecturals in this case than we probably otherwise would have. I want to talk to you now about compatibility. If you look at the aerial on the right, the property is bound by I-75 on the west, which creates a visual barrier in many ways. Actually, the property immediately to the west is FDOT-owned property. Then you have I-75. Then you have more FDOT-owned property. And then on the west side of that, you have a commercial development. To the southwest of the property, of course, you have I-75. You have a big separation. Then you have multifamily development. You also have a very tall strand of trees that would block any sort of visuals. If you've noticed, when you get off at that off ramp, you can see that strand of trees, and it's pretty significant. To the north, you have undeveloped property, but also at the commercial interchange. Same thing with the east. You have the Burnwood MPD, which is being developed for a mix of commercial and industrial uses. And to the south, you have the Hunters Ridge community. Again, you can look at the zoning map, which says the same thing. Commercial on all sides, except for the south where you have the Hunters Ridge community, which is, again, why we designed the master concept plan the way we did, in order to create as much of a separation and a buffer as possible. So again, the master concept plan, as you could see, with the lake on the south and the preserve area. I think one important thing to note is immediately to the south of us is not residential uses, it's the Hunters Ridge Golf Course. The Hunters Ridge, the residential portion of that is a little farther on the southeast side. But again, we've tried to create that separation and compatibility to be extra careful. In this process, staff has asked us to do a line of sight drawing to look at what visual the Hunters Ridge community would be able to see. And just so I don't press the wrong button, the pointer is the green one at the top, right? All right. Oh, good. All right. Just worried it was the off button. So you have the residential use here, and again, the closest development parcel. This is the line of sight we drew. It's over 600 feet from the residential unit to any proposed hotel structure. That would be the hotel parcel up here. 600 feet, to give you a visual, is, and it's 618 feet. So that literally is end zone to end zone twice. So if you can imagine you're sitting in an end zone seat at a football game, it's hard enough to see what's going on in the other end zone, let alone if you doubled that space. 618 feet is a very large distance.
Depends whether Tom Brady's playing or he isn't playing, right?
Tom Brady's playing, I'm bringing binoculars.
Okay.
You're right. So it is a long distance, but just as important, you have a natural buffer right here along Hunters Ridge, which they've placed in and they maintain. It creates a very significant visual barrier. We have our indigenous area. There's, additional distance and landscaping in between. So with the line of sight, staff has expressed that they are comfortable with compatibility. Transportation has not been an issue in both the staff report and the zoning board hearing. So we have Ted Treesh here, but in the interest of time and getting to issues of more concern to, I think, everybody, I'm going to just say that in the staff report, they accepted the transportation study. Again, the zoning board didn't add any new transportation conditions or anything, and according to the transportation study, we were found to be at an acceptable level of service. And again, if you have any questions about transportation, Ted's here to answer them. All right, so let me spend some time reviewing the zoning board hearing, what happened, the staff report, as well as staff's late filed condition. In the zoning board hearing,
Second. Before you do that, I do want to place on the record that I am concerned about the late filing from Mr. Lockwood, and I would submit that, and I'd like to submit for the record an email that Audrey sent to the staff that I agree with. And the email and I'll provide you all with a copy, indicates that that document is hearsay. Due process requires that if you're going to rely on that, I have to have the chance to cross-examine them and better understand what Mr. Lockwood's saying. He's not available. I don't have the right to cross-examine him. And because this is a quasi-judicial hearing, you can't, in my opinion, rely on that. Ms. Vance has an email that says the same thing.
Audrey?
I believe that Ms. Genson will be prepared today to be able to testify as to the points in that email that she concurs with, as well as Jay Sweet. So
Okay.
we will have testimony, or the city council will have testimony, not from me and Lockwood, but from other staff that reflects on some of the things. Now, my understanding is that's not everything.
Okay. Thank you. Council, any questions with that or thoughts? Okay. Great, thank you.
All right, so at the zoning board hearing, as Neil had talked about, they placed a condition on height for parcels 1 and 2. I do want to make clear that in the revised, in the ordinance that you have as part of your packet, it says parcels 2 and 3. I believe staff meant to write parcels 1 and 2. In our proposed revisions that we'll hand out, we've made that Scrivener's error. If staff disagrees with that, I think they can say. But parcels 1 and 2, parcel 1 is the parcel right at Hunter's Ridge. Parcel 2 is the parcel in between. Parcel 3 is the easternmost parcel that's set back over 100 feet from Bonita Beach Road. All right, so they placed a condition on parcels 1 and 2 on height, a condition on the lake setback from the Hunter's Ridge property line on the south, and a condition on access to parcel 1, and I'll go through each of those. Staff, and specifically Tool Design Group, because we were in agreement with staff prior to the late filed condition and Ian Lockwood's memo post zoning board hearing. According to the staff report, the building placement, it would have allowed us to put 2 rows of parking in front of buildings along Bonita Beach Road. We agree with the staff report. We also agree with the draft ordinance. That condition is in the draft ordinance. It is something that the zoning board reviewed. They agreed with. The only tweak to that, if you will, and we discussed this with staff after the zoning board hearing, was the ability to pay for a fee in lieu for the construction of the bike paths and the sidewalk along Bonita Beach Road. And the reason for that is quite simply that with this property right next to the underpass, us constructing that on our property, first of all, we're set so far back, it would be hard to connect that to anything. We don't know how it would connect to the east. So providing that that funding for the city to ultimately come in, take whatever right-of-way they need to take, or reconfigure the Bonita Beach Road right-of-way itself, like the vision report suggested, that's something that the city can do, but it's not something we can physically do. So we would pay a fee in lieu and help you all get that done. But again, we're generally in agreement with what staff originally recommended and what's in the draft resolution. It is that late filed condition that we don't think reflects either the character of the area or, quite frankly, the vision that you all have articulated and prior councils have articulated over time. Nor do we believe that it's the vision that has been articulated throughout the Bonita Beach Road visioning process, either in public testimony or public comment, or in the presentations made throughout that process. And I'll get into that through this presentation. All right, so first, the height limit on Bonita Beach Road. So the discussion at the zoning board was quite simple. The zoning board members agreed that that this should be a parcel for auto-centric uses, and I believe the comment was made, how can you have a 45-foot auto mechanic shop? They said, I just can't see it. Our point is there are more uses that we have proposed for parcels 1 and 2 than just the auto-centric uses. The auto-centric uses are important at this location, but we're also looking at office, at medical office, and certainly those uses can have and be built nicely at 45 feet. The other thing that they were talking about is to them it seemed like 45 feet right along Bonita Beach Road was too much massing too close to the road. So I posted some examples of what 45 feet or 3 stories looks like. right across the street on the north side of Bonita Beach Road, just to the east of here, the Colonnade Medical Center. I put the extra space storage, which is just north of Bonita Springs in Estero, right on 41, again, a 3-story building. Both of those, when you drive by, it doesn't feel intrusive on the road. That's my opinion, but obviously those are buildings that you all are familiar with and I think have experienced yourself. Again, 45 feet doesn't seem intrusive to us, but also keep in mind when I go through this presentation of where our parcels sit and where those buildings would sit. They are significant distance set back from Bonita Beach Road just because we do not own the right-of-way adjacent to the roadway itself. That's FDOT right-of-way. The lake setback. The lake setback, quite honestly, was the product of a little confusion on what the setback was meant for. So in the Land Development Code, there's a setback specified for when you construct a lake adjacent to a development under different ownership. And so by moving the lake to the south side adjacent to Hunter's Ridge, the Land Development Code requires a 50-foot setback. And it's not a design condition. It's not a condition to allow you to better design your lake. It's a condition to protect it's a condition to protect the adjacent property owner from a safety standpoint, so that you don't have kids playing in the adjacent property and meander onto your property and drown in the lake, or you don't have wayward vehicles. In this case, it would be golf carts that are adjacent that would veer off onto our property and fall into the lake. So you have that 50-foot setback. In the zoning board hearing, there was a lot of discussion about, well, how can you construct your lake if you have less than a 50-foot setback? They wanted to understand what the cross-section was, but at the end of the day, they thought 50 feet was what we should have with the cross-section. Understand, most lakes are developed with a 20-foot lake maintenance easement. So everything you need to construct your lake and provide for lake maintenance is within that first 20 feet. So the other 30 feet are really of issue. Now, in Hunter's Ridge, we put this picture up because, again, we're concerned now with wayward golf carts from the golf course. So, you know, they're on this cart path. Maybe some guy's been drinking too much on the golf course, and they're going to come onto our property and go into the lake. They would have to drive through a fence. Fence is right here. Go an additional 15 feet right into a landscape buffer, which we have to provide because we're adjacent to residential to the south. And then go from the fence 41 feet, 15 feet to the buffer, 7.5 feet there, then another 18 feet into the lake. It just doesn't add up. There's too much barrier between this golf cart path and our lake in order to make a reasonable argument that people are actually going to do that. But especially because, remember, we're on a golf course. There are lakes all over the golf course. So here, on the same cart path, they're within 33 feet of one of their own existing lakes. They don't have the fence there to prevent them from falling into their existing lake, their own lake. They don't have a landscape buffer that's required to fall into their own lake. And of course, this situation you could see throughout the golf course. I mean, cart path here, all adjacent to the lake. And so the idea that right up here, we need more of a separation because they're in more danger, it just doesn't, excuse the pun, hold water. There's too much separation and too many barriers between the path and our property. So In this case, this is a common deviation in instances like this. I've seen it before, I've argued it before. In this case, it makes a lot of sense just because of what's on the ground. All right, now let me talk about Parcel 1 access. Our understanding when the staff report first came out, and you could ask staff about this, is that based on the master concept plan, first of all, we're not asking for a deviation. We meet the connection separation requirements along Hunter's Ridge. We're not asking for a deviation here, so we put an access point that meets code requirements. Staff was concerned that based on the internal circulation of what may happen at the time of development order, we could contribute to a stacking situation along Hunter's Ridge that would come out into the interchange. Fair enough. All we're asking for is, and first of all, the development order would take care of that. If that were to happen, we would either be required to put in more stacking or we would be required to restructure our site plan. But in the interest of just not having to have this prohibited at the time of zoning, I mean, certainly I think staff would agree that you can come up with a site plan that would alleviate that concern. Let's just have it reviewed in accordance with the code at the time of development order, or approve it now just because it meets the existing land development code. And although you could always find a hypothetical reason why it wouldn't, and therefore staff would have to deny the development order, you can find a lot more reasons why it could be approved now, and it should be approved now, and you have the protections of health, safety, and the public welfare at the time of development order.
Mr. DeLisi, let me stop you there and ask you a question. Will the applicant have to do a development order TIS?
Yes.
And when you do that, does it have to address the access points and the length of turn lanes and any other component to address public safety?
It does.
So the staff, the engineering staff, will be evaluating that and how it's designed to ensure it's safe. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. And I think staff's point in the staff report originally was that they don't want it automatically approved. So if we couldn't provide all of those assurances at the time of DO, they wanted the ability to deny it at the time of DO. I don't think they were looking for the ability to outright forever deny it right now at the time of zoning, because I believe they would agree that you can create a site plan that can meet the existing code. Okay, so let me move on to the building location, and I do want to stress for a moment, this is a big issue. This is very important. It goes directly to the viability of retail development on parcels 1 and 2 on the site plan. It's based on the Bonita Beach Road Vision report that you all got, this condition, which again at your city council meeting a couple weeks ago, you said is just a guide, it's not regulatory at this point in time. There was very little, I went back in preparation for this hearing and I reviewed the tapes of the public meetings, all the public meetings that were held, the comments that were made at those public meetings. I couldn't find anything as a discussion on building placement. The vision that I saw discussed, which we agree with, was a vision about how to make Bonita Beach Road more pedestrian friendly and more bicycle friendly. We agree with that, and I think there was broad consensus on that. How can you use the road for more than one mode of transportation? And there are ways to do that, and I think the consultant did a very good job of outlining ways to do that. There are many pedestrian-friendly and bicycle-friendly communities throughout the country that aren't necessarily downtown main streets, but still they accommodate pedestrians and bicycles in a very comfortable fashion. That was the vision that I heard. In the staff report, I just want to do a quick note on the staff report. They talked about St. James CPD to the north, which is a CPD that was required to put their buildings right up against the right-of-way. So that's this CPD here. It's obviously not this building. This building has parking right in front of it. That was approved about a decade ago. Still, nothing's developed there. Saying that something has been approved like that and something can successfully develop like that are two different things. The other thing I want to point out with St. James CPD is the right-of-way frontage is very different. They're right along Bonita Beach Road. You can actually accomplish that goal if you wanted to accomplish that goal. Here, you can't easily do that. You can maybe put a corner of a building on parcel 1 on this parcel up against the road. Parcel 2, I'll show you an aerial in a moment. Setback 78 feet. The midpoint of the parcel, 78 feet from the Bonita Beach Road right-of-way. You have a diagonal building that's significantly set back. Of course, parcel 3, which is over here, over 100 feet. Okay, so again, let's talk about the Bonita Beach Road vision and what happened through all the public comment and everything going on in that study. The impetus was for network connectivity for areas west of I-75. There was a lot of discussion about about creating this grid network. Again, at the hearing 2 weeks ago, most of the discussion at the hearing was about that grid network, about where those rights-of-way would be, and especially at the intersection of US 41 with Bonita Beach Road. The vision was for a pedestrian and bicycle-friendly road. This was the cross-section for Bonita Beach Road at the interchange. That's a great cross-section. We have no issue with that cross-section. If the city wanted to create that, it's very bicycle-friendly, it's very pedestrian-friendly. It looks fine. I'm an avid fitness guy. I jog in half marathons, I ride my bike a lot. I can attest that I would love this type of area to enjoy. But there's a very big difference between that vision and what's been proposed as a condition in the staff report. And the fact is the building placement is really a misunderstanding of this specific area, and it's a misapplication of good planning practice. When we talk about pedestrian-oriented, that's very different than pedestrian-friendly. So to the left, again, this gives you an insight into the vision that Mr. Lockwood and Tool Design Group were going for to create those environments. What are you looking for? You're looking for mixed use, you're looking for high density. This was a cartoon that was used in his presentations. And those types of areas are great for reducing trip lengths. They're great for creating that pedestrian orientation, the mix of pedestrians with the buildings, the interaction with the buildings. That's a downtown vision. That's what I believe you all would want on Old 41 in your downtown. This was just a broad diagram for all commercial and interstate zone areas. Again, this is a Main Street vision, a Main Street. Now, under the big ideas he talked about in his report, the main ideas were separated bike path, increasing a street network. Those are things that we agree with, that make a lot of sense. US 41 and Old 41, again, west of 75. These concepts will reduce trip lengths in conjunction with supportive strategies, land use planning, mixed density, and building placement. Building placement cannot work as a main street with this vision without density. It just doesn't work. Pedestrians don't interact with buildings unless you have a lot of pedestrians right on the street. And the only way you get a lot of pedestrians walking in front of buildings is in dense urban areas. Or, there's an exception to that, or concentrated historic downtowns. You can have very little density right in a historic downtown, keep that pedestrian oriented. But without exception, those are the only two areas that I've seen or experienced that can have that type of vision. So what's going on in this area? Well, if you want opportunities for density, you have the DRGR. I really haven't heard that that's an opportunity for density. 1 unit per 10 acres up there. You have Southern Crew, as someone who used to lead the South Florida Water Management District, I could tell you Southern Crew is not an opportunity for density. And you have existing built suburban, very low density residential here. Now, in the planning world, we talk about what a walkable community is, or a walkable distance. How far will someone walk from their car to get to a retail establishment? The planning rule of thumb is a quarter mile. A quarter mile is essentially the depth of our parcel. So you may get some people at the northern section of Hunter's Ridge right here walking to Bonita Beach Road. That's a couple dozen homes. You don't have the density to create a main street at the interchange. And again, I haven't heard anything that would suggest that the vision at this parcel is that main street feel. Even if it was your vision to create a main street, this parcel isn't set up to do that. Again, parcel 1, it's about 30 feet at the midpoint set back. You're not right up against the right-of-way as you would be for parcels further to the east. Parcel 2, 78 feet at the midpoint of the parcel. Again, you're just not right up against the right-of-way. Across the street, you have even greater setbacks, so you can't frame the road like you would in a main street. And to the east, you have a lot of buildings that are already set back, so you don't have that character developing along the road. It's not that we're not creative or that we're not visionary. Fact of the matter is, I've given presentations on land use planning all over the country, and I could tell you this is a misapplication of good planning theory. I was the one that authored the Estero Code with a maximum setback along Corkscrew Road. I get that vision. I understand it. But in Estero, we were very careful about how we did that because we didn't want to lose out on opportunities that would otherwise come specifically at an interchange. And so at the interchange, we didn't require that setback. And the reason was, again, buildings can't physically be put at the road. You can't frame the street. You can't create that character that you would otherwise be trying to achieve. Had we done that, certainly the Miramar Design Center would have never gone in. And a few years after that was put in, it won an award from the community as the best development. So the effect of this is not that it provides a minor inconvenience for the developer. It significantly restricts the ability for the higher-end tenants to want to come to this site. Finally, let me talk about the opportunity to build a theme. I talked about this building is already set back with parking in the front, and you have a lot of burnwood already designed with parking all around the buildings, minus these 2 vacant parcels. Last week, there was a hearing on a moratorium for Bonita Beach Road that went before the planning board. And at that hearing, this specific issue was discussed at great length. And I want to talk about what the planning board said at that hearing. Because again, it was their vision at that planning board as to what should happen east of I-75, something that was really not discussed very widely in the visioning study itself. They did not agree with the idea that buildings should be placed up against the road. And the recommendation that's coming to you guys is that Burnwood, just to our east, be exempt from that vision, from the moratorium specifically, because of the idea that they don't want to see buildings placed right up against the road. A lot of back and forth. Mr. Dolmer testified, and I'll read this for you. I think where they're concerned is that you have buildings that have been constructed with a certain setback line. And again, what he's saying is buildings here that have already been constructed with the parking all around them, and I'll just paraphrase. I copied it exactly on the screen for you, but I'll paraphrase. If you push these up, it looks just downright awkward. I mean, and it doesn't fit any sort of visual character that anyone's going for. The fact is, we only have 2 out parcels right here that are already set back anyways from the right-of-way. If you're not going to create that theme along the south here, and we're essentially acquiescing to that because it's already constructed, and it would look very awkward if you tried to, having 2 parcels on the south here that all of a sudden have to be right up against with the parking behind, again, doesn't create that theme that you would be trying to construct. It just doesn't work. You're not achieving anything. And so what is the public interest that's being served by this? Again, this is not an area where the city is envisioned for higher densities. It's not consistent with the surrounding development form. The property itself doesn't even front Bonita Beach Road, so you can't frame the street that you'd otherwise want to do with the buildings right up against the roadway itself. The I-75 interchange is not designed, it's not supposed to be pedestrian oriented. It's I-75. It's an interchange. McGarvey had a quote in last week's hearing. McGarvey developed one of these buildings right on Corkscrew Road after we put that guideline in place. If you ask me to reverse the project with the reverse frontage, and he was talking about the buildings right up against the right-of-way, then I'm probably going to walk. I bled the first one, meaning Corkscrew Road. I don't want to go bleed the next one. I'll skip down to the bottom. Estero Park Commons was the development he was talking about. 35% failure is not a good number, and that's what he was experiencing because nobody knows who's inside those things. If you're doing retail, yes, it's a nice planner vision, but it's not functional because people are driving to that retail, and when you're driving, you'd like to know that it's open, people are inside, they're using it, otherwise people drive by. On a main street, it would work if you have a lot of density, if you already have pedestrian traffic, because the storefronts are right there. A lot of people are walking by. You walk by, you see people in the stores. The interchange is just simply not a main street. I guess the last point I'll make about this is that part of this vision, if you will, relied on a condition that conflicts with Florida statute. Talks about creating, taking additional right-of-way or additional bike paths or pedestrian ways from the applicant. You can maybe push that pedestrian way to the south. Again, the buildings aren't right up against the road. It would be a very awkward design, but it neither implements a public purpose in my mind, and it's certainly not roughly proportionate to the impacts of this development. In summary, we have a draft set of conditions that I'd like to pass out. Here you go. And what we've taken is the draft ordinance. It's what you have that was emailed to you, except I simplified it so you don't have to look through the whole ordinance to see our strike-through underline. It's the condition 3A, which I mentioned, with the opportunity to pay a fee in lieu so that the city can successfully do that cross-section in compliance with the tool vision, with the cross-section in the vision book. It's a deviation approval for the lake setback, an allowance for the entry to parcel 1. Again, we would have to meet the health safety criteria at the time of development order. Nothing's automatic. If you can't meet that at the time of development order, you don't get your development order. And again, the 45-foot height for parcels 1 and 2. And with that, I'll take any questions that you have.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dan. I'm going to start down here. Fred, seeing how this is close to home, literally and figuratively,
Oh, yeah.
what's
Yeah, right.
what are your thoughts, questions?
Well, I don't disagree with much of what he said. I do think that there will be much more biking out there than most people realize. And but as far as amount of pedestrians walking, I would say the quarter mile is probably a good guess, or a good rule. I have a couple or 3 things I was interested in. I don't know if this is a place to bring them up or not. One is I'd like to have y'all consider the possibility of putting some tree wells in to keep as many, in other words, you can't keep trees where a building is, you can't keep trees where a parking lot is, but there's a lot of really nice trees on that property, and I think if you could capture some of the larger ones with clumps of the smaller, when I say small, 12-inch ones, that would be good. And I understand from talking to one of the planners that you're not going to have to put as much fill in as you thought you were, so that might work. Another one is that I know the people that live out in that area, Worthington, Hunters Ridge, and even Quail West, would be interested in a no burning, no open burning. And that, and then the only other thing, I'll bring this up as a casual thing, and then the last one I want to ask a more serious question, is I'm sure that you all have dialogued with the people that have that billboard that have to go out and service it 2 or 3 times a year. You're providing adequate access for the billboard?
Yes, we are. We're not touching their access.
Okay, good. Okay. Now, the only other one, in the times that I had met with y'all, I understood that what would go out front would be 3 restaurants that would be more geared to interchange restaurants, which could be a Burger King. It could even be, I suppose, an Applebee's or something like that. And then I understood that you're going to put an office building that would look out or face or parallel I-75 or the ramp. And then you had the hotel or a 145-bed assisted living. The retail, is this one of these things where there's a whole host of uses? Like I heard you mention something about an automobile or a repair. Is any of that in that list?
Yes, there is a list of uses for for parcels 1 through 3. You have adequately described, I think, our vision for it with the hotel and the assisted living facility in parcel 6, and then retail and the interchange type uses for the other parcels. That includes the middle parcels as well as the parcels that are closer to Bonita Beach Road. Our desire would be to have restaurants. We haven't locked down the tenants at this point in time.
Right. So let's say, even though you have a vision for a hotel or a assisted living, let's suppose hypothetically none of those show up. Now what happens to that parcel?
It could be office. Office is something that's being requested for that property as well. It's highly unlikely that retail could survive back there so far from the visibility of Bonita Beach Road.
What about, does multifamily fit in this zoning? I mean, I wouldn't have a
We have
problem.
not asked for residential.
Oh, okay. What are the list of uses for that retail?
Page 2 and page 3 have a schedule of uses. And that would provide all the different, for the whole parcel, for 1 through 6. And then the ones that are limited to parcel 6 are listed as limited, the ALF, assisted living, and the hotel.
Okay. Okay, those are my questions at the moment.
Okay, great, thanks. Mike? No, looking at it, I guess attachment 1 is what you guys are looking for, and I'm guessing attachment 2 and 4 was somebody else drew up? Because like attachment 2 and 4 shows the 4 buildings right along the right-of-way.
You talking about this?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the information that came in after the zoning board hearing, that the tool design group did.
You know, I had not commented on that plan. I would be happy to go through why that plan doesn't work and why, quite frankly, it's misleading. But to answer your question, that is not what we have any desire to construct or what we think can work on this property. The master concept plan is what we're proposing, and you know, that was my presentation.
Yeah, and Councilman Gibson, if this is something that the council is thinking they want to consider, there are numerous reasons why this doesn't work, and it's not even consistent with your land development code. So I would ask Mr. Jalisi to go through those if that's the direction you're leaning.
No, I think I understand, because, you know, you're saying it's more auto-centric, and was never a big fan of liner buildings anyway, because like you, I like to see in and see the parking lot. Yeah, there's cars there, people are actually using it, and, you know, there's a lot of people there, maybe I should check it out. But the main thing is, I know you said it is auto-centric, you're not envisioning a lot of people biking, but we are planning on sinking a lot of money doing a nice bike path from out east all the way to the beach, so there will be people biking by. I just want to make sure that we have good connections for pedestrians and bicycles to get into the you know, the whole complex, and internally, I know this would come up at development order anyway, but internally we have, you know, good connections in there.
Yes, we do. We do have pedestrian and bicycle connections on the master concept plan, I believe, but there is a condition in the staff report that requires us to put those in early on in the site development. But I do want to make it clear that we are all in support of the vision as far as a pedestrian-friendly environment goes and a bicycle-friendly environment. The vision that was articulated in the process is something that I think we can buy into, and I've heard a broad consensus that people can buy into. And that was a vision that sees more people riding their bike and walking in the future. You want those nice bike paths and pedestrian ways. When you move from that to now we're going to design our buildings to be pedestrian oriented, that's a Main Street design, and that's very different than making comfortable bikeways and pedestrian ways. So the bikeways we're all in support of. We're providing them on site. We're providing them internal and circulation. In fact, we're providing a pedestrian way around the lake itself. We want people to walk on the site, walk into the site, but that's a far cry from this idea of the pedestrian-oriented buildings.
Okay, and
Yeah. Oh, I was going
Okay.
to ask a follow-up to that. To that end, Mr. Jalisi, I know that you've gotten to reflect on, since you worked for us, there are some of those buildings closer to the road. Can you contrast, for example, the promenade, which is set back off the road, and the Mattress King and Polo Tropical and some of those buildings right on 41 up in Estero? How
Well,
that works?
Yeah, I mean, when you put, and McGarvey talked about this a lot, but when you put the buildings right up against the road, the mechanical equipment, all of that sort of stuff that you can screen, you know, that goes right in front of your building. Theoretically, you can put them on the side. It doesn't work. What Toole was talking about is creating entry doors right along the sidewalk. Again, as far back as we're set back from the road, and as little pedestrian orientation or activity would be there. Not to say people aren't going to walk along the road, they are, but for that to function, you don't build a door on your store along the road for one person to walk by every day, or 2 people, or 5 people. You build it because that's where the main traffic coming into your store is. And so it hasn't really worked great along Corkscrew Road. I think some people like the feel. You know, it's a little different. Again, I'm only thankful that in that discussion they realized that the interchange was not the right place, just because of how the interchange functions and who owns the right-of-way in those locations where the buildings would be functionally located.
Okay, I have one more, but I think Audrey had a comment, though.
I did. At this point, this has been added to the packet, but it is not officially in the record, and it's being discussed by the applicant. So I presume at this time, there's no objection to adding Ms. Gunson's May 9th in the record at this time. Her May 9th memorandum with all the attachments.
The only other thing you brought up earlier, how a 3-story building or 45-foot height was fine right along the roadway, but you're basically saying you're not planning on doing anything right on the right-of-way anyway. You're looking at having it set back further. So, again, you know, it should be fine because it's going to be set back further. So,
That's correct.
okay, that's all I have.
Okay, right. Greg?
I just had a couple questions. I agree with a lot of what you said about the lake setback. I guess, and this is kind of going to touch a nerve on Councilman Forbes, but I know at one time they've talked about closing that intersection right there at Hunter's Ridge, access to the left, I guess going to the west. Is there any plan to, you know, to go out to a different way? Because I noticed on one of your plans when you're asking for access, one of them says private roadway. Do you have access somewhere, some other way, or is it going to be a left out and then go up and make U-turns, or right out, I'm sorry, and then make U-turns on the Bonita Beach Road? Is that a consideration of any of your people that are coming in that, hey, if this road gets shut off, we're not going to build here, and then it's going to be
I can answer that. We've had several meetings with Lee County DOT. As you know, Bonita Beach Road is owned by Lee County. And you're correct, from time to time, they have discussed whether or not they're going to close the left in into Hunters Ridge Boulevard. It will still be a right in, right out. They're monitoring it. They put us on notice that they're monitoring it, and we'll still have access. They know they have to provide for U-turn somewhere. They haven't analyzed that and figured out where that's supposed to be located. They have a variety of thoughts on where that should be, but that's going to be something Lee County's going to decide, and they're going to have to do the engineering analysis to figure out where that works best.
Okay. And then my other kind of comment was the same as Councilman Forbes, is that with that billboard being there, is the billboard going to remain there and you're going to provide access to it? Because the way it looks now is the road that Hunter's Ridge just vacated and got, it kind of was a 2-trail past that to there, and that looks exactly where your lake's going to be.
Yeah, and I think that was part of the confusion the zoning board had, why they didn't grant the setback.
Well, and it kind of leads to your setback issue also.
Yeah, trying to. Yeah, I mean they currently have a dirt road right here. I think Drew could probably walk you through this or jump up if I'm saying anything incorrect, but they currently maintain their access right here. We would continue to provide access through the dirt road and down right here to the billboard site.
All right, well, I guess that's kind of my question. If you're going to provide that dirt road or provide that access, isn't that going to kind of accommodate what the zoning board wanted with their 50-foot setback from property to that?
Well, no. I mean, 50 feet is a big distance. I think right now they have about section. Sorry.
Mr. Fitzgerald, how about, since you're the engineer, do you want to address that?
Sure. Good morning.
No.
For the record, Drew Fitzgerald, So this typical section here will show you which, where that access is currently and where it would continue to be. So there's a 15-foot BSU easement along that south property line, so we can't really do anything within that easement without having BSU's approval anyway. That's also where the existing dirt road
Okay.
is that they use to get back. And so we're going to continue to maintain that same condition for them.
Okay.
So the landscaping, Drew, Mr. Fitzgerald. So the landscaping will be on the north side of that dirt road to prevent them from traveling north.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay.
That's it? Okay, Amy?
Just leave that up there right now, because I have a question about, because I think one of the points that was being made at the zoning meeting, if I recall it correctly, was not so much, was a concern about how the lake was being built and intrusion on that. And that picture, I think, is a good one, because if you go, my question is, we're approximately visually, where's what do you have up there, 15 feet under the purple, where you have the BSU easement?
That's correct.
That's from the fence, right? So that includes the green part that's pictured. Does it include the road? Is that more than 15 feet or less than 15 feet?
Well, the 15 feet is just in the purple.
No, but related to the photo above that, what do you think, just guesstimate, the photo?
Oh, the photo.
Go from the
Okay.
fence, and then there's there's some
It would be
turf.
right. It
And
would
then
be
there's
along.
then there's the road. So how wide is the road?
Well, this is actually beyond where this right-of-way exists. So you're right here. This picture is facing towards that location.
Right.
But where we're asking for the deviation is not like the road. Here's Hunter's Ridge
Right.
Court up here. So the path starts here at the south end of the Hunter's Ridge Court. That's what they've been using to get back
Right.
here to the billboard, and that's the purple area that they would continue to use. Am I answering your question?
Not really.
Or? Okay.
Let me see if I can look at that and answer my own question. Where are you going to put the vegetation?
So that is the green that's between the yellow and the purple shown on this exhibit here. The buffer width required for those two uses is 15 feet.
And so what the concern of the zoning was that width was not the 50 feet that was required. You're asking for a deviation there. So where is you're asking for 41 feet. Where is that?
That is right here.
Just in that one spot or all along?
This would also be here.
Okay.
So the lakes have to be constructed with sinuousness
Right.
to look natural. So
Okay.
you are going to have some places like right here where it's going to be closer to 50 feet anyway. But in order to achieve that sinuosity, we're asking for a little bit of a deviation along these edges here to allow us to construct that typical
But
section
the
as
way
you see
that's
it.
written, it shows that in 40, shown on the diagram, that 41 feet would take out the yellow part.
It's
would-
part of the yellow part, that's correct.
All right, so that,
So you have your slope, that's the
what does it say,
orange.
Public pedestrian path?
That's what Dan was talking about.
All right.
Around that lake,
All
we're
right.
constructing
So in
a,
that 41 feet, how are you going to put that in there?
and the 41 feet, it'll be constructed exactly how it's shown here.
All right, so that's a 41-foot thing, so you have room
Correct.
for that. Okay.
Okay.
I have some other questions. On the diagram where you show the placement of the buildings, and I want to be certain that I have the parcels correct in my mind. I'm sorry. The one that's at the corner is which parcel? Is that 3?
Parcel 1.
Or is that 1? Okay. So it's reversed. So according to what you're asking for is that, you want to get the height of all those 3 parcels at 45 feet, is that what you're asking for?
That's correct.
And the zoning board wanted to just have it wanted a restriction on that, and which parcels
Well,
did
well,
they?
let me correct that. In the language that we passed out to you, what we did was that Mr. Worcester's the one that made the motion in reference to the autocentric uses. So what the language says is parcels 2 and 3 are limited to a maximum height of 35 feet. If the parcels are developed with autocentric uses, all other uses are limited to a maximum height of 45 feet. So we understood what Mr. Worcester was saying. He was saying, if you're going to do a restaurant or an autocentric use, I don't want it to be 45 feet. So we said, okay, if it's an autocentric use, it'll be 35 feet, otherwise 45.
Just for clarification, when Councilwoman Caramba said it, was she talking about the corner? She's talking about the south
You
or
mean
the east. The far east one is parcel 1. That's
This-
parcel 1 or parcel 3?
That's parcel 1.
That's parcel 1.
Oh, well, I had it right. That's the other corner, okay.
Yeah.
Now it makes more sense.
Sorry to interrupt, Amy.
All
I
right,
seen you
no,
write
thank-
it that way, and I
Yeah,
just wanted to
well,
make sure.
I wanted to make sure that because it's confusing, the orientations that we have here. So, but review what the zoning board wanted there again, please.
So,
Starting with the correct numbers.
so what the zoning board wanted is for parcels 1 and 2, they didn't want to see for autocentric uses
To have
and I believe what they said is they used a mechanic shop, for instance. They didn't want to see that at 45 feet right on the road. The massing seemed too big. I think to Councilman Gibson's point, well, I mean, we're not right on the road. First off, we're set back 78 feet. This is 78 feet right here. So we're not right on the road, but also 45 feet, when you visualize that, you do see visuals of buildings, and just understanding what 45 feet is, it just doesn't look that scary. But the other thing is that I think what Neil just mentioned, our point is that we have other uses that we're asking for those parcels. If they were office, certainly office at 45 feet is fairly common, and that would make sense. So if it's a mechanic, we can accept that shouldn't necessarily be 45 feet.
Okay.
If it's an office use, it should be.
Okay. And then I am concerned about, I know this is probably not a zoning issue, about the aesthetic as you come off the 75 exit there. And so the one that would be most significant would be the parcel 3, right?
I mean, yes and no. Parcel 3, when you're coming off, I question how much people are going to be looking at parcel 3, especially with this line of vegetation that's in the FDOT-owned property. But as you come around, I think the first thing you'll see are parcels 1 and 2.
Because now when you come off it, you have this wonderful lush vegetation, which, will that still be there? Or
Some
no?
of it will, for certain.
How much vegetation is there, do you know?
Uh,
Like between your property and the FDOT property?
I'm not sure. I mean, you could see on the aerial where our property
Right.
is and where all the vegetation is. I mean, if you used it as a point of comparison, when you're driving along I-75 and you see this line of trees in here, my guess is probably fairly similar.
Yeah, and attachment 1 is kind of more of a close-up, and you can kind of see what trees will be left in the FDOT.
And then my other question is, I am persuaded by the notion that I don't think it would be aesthetically pleasing or functional to have buildings that are front and back and front and back. And we have an in-place development along Bonita Beach Road further east, so I think it makes sense that it should be looked at in a total way than just looking at an isolated application here. So I'm persuaded by what you said there, but I just would ask Jackie if we could incorporate, or even you, some notion that we would take into account when we do the development order, that they would be compatible in setback with the surrounding area. Would that make sense or no?
For the record, Jacqueline Genson, if that is council's pleasure, you can propose that as a condition.
Does that make sense?
We'll just wait for our presentation
Okay,
if that's
all
okay,
right.
because we have other staff members that would
Okay,
like to
okay.
communicate some ideas.
Let me see. I think, and I just want to make a comment that part of the vision, the Bonita Beach Vision Study is one of connectivity. So I'd like the staff to respond to the notion that you would rather pay than put in some of these bike paths. And it may be preferable for the city that we get them built rather than to just take the money for it and build them later. Or maybe it'd be preferable to wait until we have the, a larger portion of that. But I think that that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, and our comment on that is just that if you look at the right-of-way here and our ability to control what's happening in here, it's very limited. And so the cross-section that that Tool Design Group laid out in their study, it showed a 150-foot cross-section along this portion of Bonita Beach Road. And it talked about a relaning and reconfiguration of everything within that 150-foot cross-section. And so for us to actually do work within that cross-section, number one, even if we just did it along our frontage, how do you taper that down without doing the entire extent of the roadway out to Bonita Grand? We don't have control or the ability to do all of that construction. But we also don't have control right in front of our property. If we had the right...
If they did it according to the diagram, but they could, so I guess there never was a suggestion that you would put it on your property. It would be, didn't you have did you just have a bike? You did have a bike path around it, didn't you?
We do have internal bike and pedestrian
Right.
circulation.
Not on the outside? You don't have it on that outside out there? On the boundary along right there in your plan?
No. No. I mean, it's not.
Well, I know that's, no, but I thought that some of these dotted lines went to the boundary too, but they don't. So you to just have it internal to that, okay. All right, I think I have all my questions answered.
Great. Greg, I think you had something quick, and then
Yeah,
I
I
know
just had a
Fred-
follow-up. When you talk about the auto-eccentric, and I've seen it more and more, especially like if you go up towards the Tampa and the Wesley Chapel, what about a car dealership going there? Would that be limited to the 35 or 45? Because I know like the new Mercedes is almost 45 feet down there to the south, and I know at the Wesley Chapel, the Toyota area, so...
That, I can't recall if we have that as requested use.
All right, I'm just making sure, because auto-centric,
Yeah, no, it's a good
could it
question.
be construed that way, that's all?
It-
Sales, it could be a sales place,
Yeah.
retail, and then go with a,
It's not, it's separate, it's generally separated as car dealership, I believe, in Schedule of Uses.
okay,
Auto
just
sales.
checking, that's all.
Thanks. Thanks. Fred?
I was wondering, I don't believe you would have this kind of intention, but I would like to see, we put language in here that would exclude the possibility of any kind of an automobile body shop being built on that site, number one. Any kind of outside storage, number two. And things where you'd have like a yard with all kind of construction materials for sale with construction equipment. And I'm going to the aesthetics of it. I think you don't want to look at that when you're entering into the gateway into Bonita Springs, which that southbound ramp does that. And I don't think you would want that, so I don't think you would have any problem accepting those exclusions.
Well, let me
Yeah, the
just
staff-
comment on that for a moment. Sorry. Yeah, so in our discussions with staff, that was a big issue that they brought up, and you're correct that the types of things that you're talking about are not things that we envision for this property. Staff had recommended a condition with an incredible restriction on it because the area that we're trying to the happy median that we're trying to do, so to speak, is if you have a clothes store and you want to have a sidewalk sale, you know, with clothes items, that's fine. I think we all agree that that's fine. And so the severe restriction that staff has put in their staff report, I definitely think addresses that concern.
Right.
And that's condition 4.
But these things I brought up, you wouldn't have a problem putting that in there.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, I want to go back to, we didn't talk about it, but the revised conditions, because I want to go back to Councilman DeWitt's question. We further added language to make it clear that the intent is to design that first access in a way that's safe. So the language that we proposed limits it to a right-in, right-out, and a continuous median, so nobody can cheat. You know, sometimes you do a pork chop, people
Right.
cheat.
Yeah.
So we provided language that doesn't allow you to cheat and ensures the safety aspect. Staff will still look at it, but we wanted to make it clear to the council that the intent was to design it in a way that would be safe.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Council, anything else? Okay.
Well, are we going to put my no burning as a condition of the approval? No open burning?
All right, so I have no objection, but what I'm looking at, so it does allow groups 1 and group 2. So excluding body shops, paint shops,
Yeah, and any outside storage or, or building material with related construction
I would just
equipment.
take out possibly group 2, because group 2 is the one that specifies paint shops, body shops, rebuilding or repair of auto bodies, diesel engines, frames, front ends, motor springs and tops, rebuilding and retreading tires, tire recapping, and vulcanizing tires and tubes. So that's all the intense uses that you normally wouldn't.
Yeah,
If
but
we
they
took
put
out-
a,
If you take out group 2,
yeah, but if they put in a mechanic shop there, which is under that use, I mean, that's diesel mechanics and some
Yeah, I
of that
think-
stuff.
I don't have a problem with mechanic shop, just a body shop with all the bent-up cars is not a good thing to see as you're coming down an off-ramp.
Right.
so for purposes of group 1 and mechanics, you already have, so I mean, it includes diagnostic services and,
Why don't we just add a sentence to this uses and say
Prohibited
the
uses will
following
be.
uses will be
Yeah, I
excluded?
think if you look at the list of permitted uses, I actually think it was designed to address this. For example, contractors and builders, groups 1 and 2, any on-site work must be conducted indoors. And you look at, say, department store, outdoor display is limited to a maximum of 500 square feet. So those instances where outdoor display is allowed is limited, and then still subject to staff's condition. Like,
I think the only thing that we'd be concerned with there is if you had a tire shop, for instance, where everything was done indoors, where you're not storing tires outdoors,
No,
that'd
that's
be
not a
fine.
problem.
Yeah,
Yeah, but why can't we just exclude automobile body shops?
yeah, we don't have that. We
Okay.
have auto
do.
parts
you have group 2.
and auto repair and service, groups 1 and 2. Okay, so you want to take out group 2, is that what you're suggesting?
I was suggesting take out group 2 or make group 2 limited to diesel and tires indoor only,
Okay,
Yeah, that's fine.
and diesel indoor
Yeah.
only.
And
Fred,
I-
anything else?
The only other thing I would encourage that we really make a real good effort to where we're not gonna have a building and not gonna have a roadway or a parking lot to try and preserve as many of the nicer trees. And it doesn't have to be the giant ones that are 24 inches in diameter. Could even be the 12s, because take a long time for your trees to get back up there, and you'll be, in fact, we should be able to give you credit for saving those trees against some of the landscaping, I would think.
No credit.
Other than that, I would move to approve it with those.
I want to hear that.
Staff still needs to do their presentation.
Shoot. I'm trying to make a date.
That sounds good for y'all.
Okay, Janet?
Did you want to take a restroom break in between?
No,
Okay. Just want to make sure.
go for it.
Good morning again, Council. For the record, Jacqueline Genson. I apologize for not having the PowerPoint loaded earlier. We were having technical difficulties, so I was frantically getting it ready. Just to let you know, this is the staff review team that worked on this application, whether or not they are here presently. There was a significant amount of disciplines. Outside counsel reviewed our staff report and helped us through the culmination at the end of this presentation and case. As the applicant has stated, Ian Lockwood was a party review to this application, as well as Lee County DOT and the Florida Department of Transportation all had input into this application and the conditions. Ms. Vance already read the request into the record, so I will not repeat that information. Again, to go over the zoning board summary, I wanted to go ahead and explain the various themes and issues and items that were discussed, and then throughout the presentation, I will go ahead, or other staff members will go ahead and address how those items were addressed or summarized and handled at the zoning board hearing. But in relation to each discipline, as it was discussed at the zoning board, there was discussion as it relates to zoning for the height of parcels 1 through 3. And I want to go ahead and apologize. The draft ordinance should have read parcels 1 through 3 was the height limitation for 35 feet. I sincerely apologize. It's in the transcript on several pages, but it was recommended for parcels 1 through 3, the height be limited to 35 feet. Another concern that was brought up by a zoning board member was the concentration of certain uses at this location, repair and self-service fuel stations, and then general access to the parcels. So we'll go ahead and address that in those sections of the presentation. Then for transportation, there was significant discussion on the methodology of the transportation, growth rates, vested trips from the development areas outside of the project, timing of traffic counts, what would be the impact of Bella, Logan Road, and then long-term improvements for the interchange, and then direct access to Parcel 1. So again, we'll discuss that later in detail. For environmental, there was discussion on, well, if there's exotic removal of the understory, what does it do to the preserve? So we'll go ahead and discuss that in detail at that time. Engineering, we already heard from the applicant the discussion on the distance from the lake and safety concerns, the ability to access the lake for the billboard, which we already discussed, and then also the drainage and flooding impacts as it relates to this project and how it discharges to the west. With the zoning board summaries, the zoning board did recommend approval of staff's recommendations of approval and conditions. We did make some changes at the hearing as well, did the applicant, and the zoning board did accept those changes. Because of the number of items that were discussed, the zoning board went ahead and made the approval in a 3-part motion, if you will. So what I did is I went ahead and delineated for you those 3 items and the votes. So again, the limitation of the height for parcels 1 through 3 to 35 feet, that was approved 6-1. The 50-foot excavation setback to the south, that was approved 7-0 to deny that deviation essentially. And then number 3 was to deny direct access to Parcel 1, and that also carried unanimously 7-0. Process and procedure, I explained this at the zoning board, and what we tried to do with this staff report, and we definitely welcome your feedback, is we really wanted to educate the general public and the boards on how we go ahead how we review and process these rezoning applications. So you will find in this staff report, it tried to be very explanatory, and then we tried to go ahead and incorporate hyperlinks. So if people had questions and they wanted to see the code themselves, you could go ahead and do that, especially online. You could click on it and it would go ahead and take you to the Municode website where you could review those sections yourself. But really what's important to understand too here is, and especially ever since we've been working with outside counsel, is that we really review these applications, and our code requires us to review applications through a checklist, the current code. So in order to be deemed sufficient, the applicant has to submit items that are required on that checklist. Now, whether or not we agree or disagree on the content of their submission is what we do once we have all the material available. So in this case, the applicant did submit all the application requirements that they needed. They were found sufficient. And at that time, our code says you shall schedule for public hearing. And in between the time that we find them sufficient to the public hearing, we go ahead and work with the applicant on substantive comments and issues. And at that point, that's where we flesh out some areas where we agree or where we don't disagree, and they formulate into conditions. And we formulate our recommendation based on the review, the review, findings, and conclusions that are set forth in our land development code. That is the criteria we use to generate our recommendation. That is the criteria that the zoning board makes with their recommendation, and that is the same criteria that this board is supposed to do with their final recommendation. Again, just to give a citywide location map, most of everyone is familiar where this project is at the southeast quadrant of the interchange. And again, a zoomed in aerial for your viewing. The applicant already went over the future land use map, zoning, and existing use, so I won't elaborate where that's already been discussed. But also, this area is located in the existing Bonita Beach Road corridor overlay. And we'll go into more detail on what that was later in the presentation. I'm going to go over the future land use zoning and general uses for compatibility purposes. This is the subject property, and what I want to show you is just pictures on the ground of where this parcel is. So you'll see this is actually on the south side of Bonita Beach Road, looking at what we would call parcels 1 through 3. This is looking at the property from across the street. So this is at the north part of Bonita Beach Road, looking across Bonita Beach Road. So this is the property here. And then this is the northern property across Bonita Beach Road looking to the north. So this is looking here. So again, a lot of vacant commercial property. Some of it is entitled, but again, it's areas ripe for new development and infill. This is a view for the eastern properties. So here we are on Hunters Ridge Boulevard, and this is looking into Hunters Ridge residential community. So you'll see their vegetated buffer to the south. This is Trade Center Drive, which is one of the existing roadway network systems in the Burnwood Park of Commerce. And then this is the existing mobile and 7-Eleven gas station. So we are just on Bonita Beach Road looking south. So you'll see the Burnwood vegetative buffer that's already established and the gas station canopy behind. To the west, you have mainly FDOT controlled property. So there is a tiny sliver of land that actually runs directly adjacent to the western boundary of this property, and that's owned by Florida Department of Transportation. This is a view of that property as you exit the ramp. And here's the billboard location that's on the applicant's southwestern portion here. To the south, as the applicant had explained, you have Hunters Ridge Court. That lease was brought up at the zoning board, just questions of the history of that, and Ms. Vance did go ahead and address those questions to the zoning board. This is the Hunters Ridge Golf Course, along with the fence that the applicant had explained earlier in their presentation and some of the vegetation that currently exists. And then this is the entranceway into Hunters Ridge development. And again, this is the same photograph showing the Hunters Ridge buffer where the residential community begins. History of entitlements, again, as the applicant had explained, the most eastern portion of the property has a conventional zoning district on it called tourist commercial. And then the western portion has a very old planned development that was approved by the county in 1986. And the old master concept plan and zoning for that planned development was a motel, a large restaurant, automobile service station, so your gas stations, and then some minor repair shop uses as well. That was kind of the trend back in 1986 for those types of uses. And that it also allowed all the underlying uses in the CT district. But as you can see, a very older development plan. Again, the applicant's not asking to retain that or reinstate those uses, but you can just see the vast difference between what was approved back in the 80s. The proposed master concept plan, this is viewing north. Again, as the applicant explained, it's developed or anticipated for development into 6 different development parcels with their water management system here as a lake, a small area of dry detention, and the preserve to the south. The intensity, as we already explained, was for 150,000 square feet of commercial or office uses, 150 room hotel or an assisted living. They're not asking for both, it's one or the other. And you will see through here there's an internal pedestrian and bicycle network internal to the development that they're also proposing to connect up into Bonita Beach Road. There's separate access points that we'll discuss later in detail. And then there's a variety of cross-sections that explain how certain items would be designed throughout around the lake. Again, on the master concept plan, what the applicant is requesting is just a conceptual layout of buildings. They're asking for flexibility in terms of until they secure an actual tenant for these parcels, they're not really sure what's going to develop there. So you'll see on their master concept plan a lot of general language so they can ask for more flexibility until they can secure an end user. With parcels 1 through 3, they had requested a height limit of 45 feet. Staff did support that request because that is genuinely what is consistent throughout this corridor. So Burnwood has similar height restrictions, as does the properties to the north. Some of them have a higher height request of 55 feet. We do recognize and understand the board's concerns for autocentric uses really needing that much height. But again, as the applicant stated, if they have an office user, a medical office user, they may need that flexibility to have a 45-foot tall building. So, but again, just wanted to reiterate that the zoning board did recommend 35 feet for parcels 1, 2, and 3 all along the Bonita Beach Road frontage. Parcels 4 through 6 is requesting a height of 65 feet. And staff did recommend approval of that upon receipt of their line of sight exhibit drawing, which has been attached as an attachment B to this zoning ordinance, just because we want to make sure that privacy intrusions were addressed as it related to the Hunters Ridge community to the east. And then you'll also see there's property development regulations that are also documented on their master concept plan. This is a zoomed in version of their parcels 1 through 3, again with the north arrow. And as you can see, the general footprint of the buildings they're delineating, but again, asking for flexibility to determine that at time of local development order until they can secure an end user. You'll see their buffers identified along the boundary of the site. This is an example of the pedestrian circulation system that they're anticipating, roadway networks, access, things of that nature. Parcels 4 through 6, as I explained earlier, the height limitation of 65 feet for these areas. Those are the big differences for that. And then we have the preserve area as well. And the applicant went over in more detail this cross-section here, and staff would be happy to do that later if you'd like as well. This is an image of Hunters Ridge Court, where Hunters Ridge has asked to go ahead and be able to use this for parking of private vehicle storage, things of that nature, boats and whatnot. And then this is a picture of the preserve area looking at this corner right here. And Mr. Kirby can explain a little bit more of how the exotic removal and things of that nature also apply. This is the line of sight exhibit that staff requested. It was not available at time of staff report reproduction, but the applicant did provide it to us prior to the zoning board hearing. And we went ahead and asked to incorporate this as a condition, whereas any parcel, actually it's specifically for parcel 6, really for the hotel, because that's the one that's most closest to the Hunters Ridge community. just to go ahead and really make sure we're protecting the privacy of the residential in Hunter's Ridge to the east. So you'll see that condition in the zoning ordinance as proposed. So we make sure we can definitely, protect the privacy of those residents. And between the site characteristics of the preserve, the existing buffering vegetation along Hunter's Ridge that borders Burnwood, you can see a lot of our intrusion concerns are mitigated. Schedule of uses. There was some discussion here about the schedule of uses. The applicant and staff generally had consensus after we worked through several rounds of sufficiency on the schedule of uses. So you'll see that in staff's recommended condition 2. I went ahead and attached into the staff report attachment B, which was their requested uses. The biggest difference there was their request for outdoor storage and display. And as they had explained in the question and answer session today, staff went ahead and prepared an extensive outdoor display condition in your draft ordinance. That's condition 4, because we know that's a big concern of City Council, is the aesthetics of this corridor. So you'll see those extensive conditions there. One of the items that came up at the zoning board was zoning board member Inserpi was concerned about the concentration of certain uses. So he was very concerned about the uses being concentrated in this area here. And that was not a issue that the rest of the members of the zoning board shared. So in terms of limiting those types of uses in the schedule of uses, that was not proposed as part of their recommendation. But I did want to go ahead and address that in this hearing today. Again, as I explained, there's extensive outdoor display and sale conditions based on the council's renewed priority for aesthetics in this corridor and in this gateway. So again, you'll also see in your schedule of uses, which is condition 2, you'll see only certain uses are allowed on certain parcels. So they're actually specified. So you'll see, for example, maybe auto repair or the gas station is only limited to parcels 1 or 2. So it's not a wholesale of uses can go anywhere. There are some uses that are specifically referenced to parcels. And then just to explain, and this was hyperlinked into the staff report, there are supplemental regulations in our current land development code for some of these auto-centric and visual intensive uses. So there's extra regulations for gas stations, fuel service stations, fast food restaurants. So we have extensive regulations that deal with architectural, color banding, landscaping already in our code. So they'll still have to comply with those. So again, we really try to make this as educational as possible. Building orientation. In our staff report, we went ahead and explained the Bonita Beach Road corridor overlay. And just to give you a little more history on that, that was a study that the Lee County Community Development Department had done for the city in 2000. And it was a several-page report that identified current land use patterns and recommendations of how the city could move forward with a visioning overlay, if you will, for this area. And what that resulted in was a 2001 amendment for Bonita Beach Road. It dealt with the sign code, it dealt with the zoning chapter, it dealt with our development services standards, and it made modifications to the land development code for example, if an applicant wanted a certain use, it would only be allowed by planned development. And that way, we could go ahead as staff and then as individual zoning board and city council, look at those uses. How did it fit on a plan? Were the buffers adequate? Was the setback adequate? So things that you could actually look at and you could condition. We also only allowed certain uses by special exception. They established height corridor restrictions. So there's a height standard for uses that on Beach Road, west of 41, and then there's different height restrictions for uses east of 41 on Bonita Beach Road. So again, those types of items will be reviewed at time of plan development rezoning or special exception to see if it's a compatible use or a desirable use in this area. So that's one of the things that we're doing today. Then the other item that's coming into play is the Bonita Beach Road visioning final report. And as we all know, 2 weeks ago, City Council adopted that visioning amendment, and we suspect Land Development Code amendments will be forthcoming. Actually, Alexis Crespo from Waldrop Engineering will be doing a presentation this Wednesday to get direction from you on what Land Development Code amendments you want to see so we can implement that vision. So you'll see those items. While we would love to go ahead and have the applicant address those items now, we can't because it's not adopted. But there are some existing policies in our comprehensive plan where we can look for those things. I already explained the visioning amendments. The other item that we reviewed this request under was our bicycle and pedestrian master plan, which McMahon and Associates had prepared an update to, and that was adopted earlier this year. And the applicant is supportive of incorporating those items into their plan for the separated bikeway facilities and the pedestrian connections. Next, I'm going to go ahead and have Jay Sweet from our office go ahead and explain Mr. Lockwood's involvement in this application after the zoning board. We originally incorporated some of his comments into our conditions, but after the zoning board, we wanted more clarification. So we reached out to Ian. So Jay's going to go ahead and explain our discussions with him and why we recommended changes to conditions 3, 5, and 7. And also what I forgot to do is I need to, for the clerk and for the record, I want to go ahead and enter our staff report packet of May, I think it was May 11th is when we actually turned it into the clerk's office into the record. Submit that for the record.
And if I may ask you a few questions on that?
Yes.
Okay, so the packet is different than the initial staff report. There was a modified staff report?
We did not modify the staff report.
Okay.
What we did is, in your packet, I went ahead and what we always do is we do the city council agenda, we do the participants list, we do the minutes, and we do the draft zoning ordinance. What I like to do for my cases with the zoning board information is also attach my presentation, the applicant's presentation if it's available. In this case, we also had a transcript, so we went ahead and attached the transcript for your review as well. But also because of the coordination with Mr. Lockwood after the zoning board hearing, I went ahead and I tried to explain that in a one-page memo so you could understand why you were getting some additional information. I did not change the staff report.
So the one-page memo and the attachments to the one-page memo are all being entered into the record at this time?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay, and I just want to, for the record, express my objection to the Ian Lockwood memo and discussions about what Ian said, because again, that's still hearsay.
At this point, the staff, does Mr. Arline wish to explain how the process will proceed to address the hearsay issue that Ms. Montgomery is raising?
Good morning. It's Terrell Arline with David Theriak's office on the phone. We discussed the issues of the new comp plan policies with staff and wanted to ensure that the decision that the board was making today was actually going to be based upon the plan that was in effect, not necessarily based upon the plan that was approved, voted on May 3rd, but is technically not in effect, and it could be challenged. And I think we got to a point where everybody understood that legal concept, and at that point, we didn't, Mr. Theriak and my office, we didn't get into the specific details of this project other than just to address the issue of how the new comp plan may or may not be applicable here. And I understand that at that point, staff looked at the project under the actual current comp plan and not the proposed plan. So that would be my response to that point. If you have any questions, I'll be here.
Mr. Sweet, Mr. Arline, if I may, Mr. Sweet is about to testify. Is it okay if I ask, do you have any objection, or Ms. Montgomery, do you have any objections if for the tribunal I ask a few questions as to his review of the Lockwood and how he formed his own analysis?
No,
So he'll be testifying as to his opinions, not necessarily Mr. Lockwood's?
correct. He's, exact. Mr. Lockwood is not there, but he's certainly a competent planner, and staff can tell you what their opinion is. They're there, certainly there.
Thank you. If I may just ask Mr. Sweet a few questions. Mr. Sweet, for the record, please state your name and position.
I'm Jay Sweet. I'm city surveyor, and I'm a certified planner.
And, yes, I'm sorry. And in your work capacity, did you review a certain electronic message from Mr. Ian Lockwood?
Yes.
Okay. And were you able to form a basis of your own opinions based on the existing comp plan that you will now explain here today to
Yes.
the City Council?
Yes.
Thank you. Please proceed.
Real briefly, we're going to talk about the vision of Bonita, but not the visioning plan that's been talked about. We want to talk about specifically in the comp plan. There is when the comp plan was originally adopted, the City Council then, and since then, we have a vision of what we anticipate the city to be. And part of that vision talks about there should be points of arrival as you come to the city. And as you enter the city, these points of arrival should give you a sense of place. Specifically, it says it should announce the city's a green city, that it's a walkable city, and that it clearly announces to the travelers that you're in the city, that it's not just some other place down the road, that you've actually entered into the city. And I think that's sort of the sense that has been talked about for a long time, at least the 5 years I've been here. The City Council has always talked about there needs to be this sense of place, this sense of arrival, and whether it's by a sign, by buildings, by landscaping, you need to know that you're now in the city of Bonita Springs. So I want to talk about that sense of arrival in context for just a second. And part of that is, it's not just the subject property. It has to go out. And in reality, and we don't know this to be 100% fact, but it appears that DOT is going to pick one of these two driveways. They're sort of concentrating this driveway where it'll be a signal at some time in the future if they ever shut down the driveway that we've talked about. The same way there's the driveway over here at the Home Depot, and this one may or may not be shut down sometime in the future. And if you look at that, stretch of Bonita Beach Road as the point of arrival, as you get off 75, the comp plan specifically talks about getting off 75 as a point of arrival, that you should be announced that you're in the city of Bonita Springs. Here is, and I'll come back to this in a second, here is their site plan for the first 3 lots, of which there's been a lot of discussion. And there's been discussion this morning about how it would look so terrible if you put these up against the road because they won't line up with the buildings down the street. Well, that's factually not true, because the buildings down the street, as they also mentioned, this lot is further back. And so even pushing the buildings more towards Bonita Beach Road, you still have that alignment as you look down Bonita Beach Road to the east. And so you're not going to have this terrible gestation of the buildings. There was some talk earlier about, and remember, let me go back a second. When we look at this, even though we have, wrong button, even though we have this parcel today, we also know there's the St. James over here, there's Bonita 75 over here, there's Burnwood over here, and then on this side, of course, we have Home Depot, Bonita Exchange, and we have this area here that has yet to be really redefined how it will develop. But as you look at those things in a whole, you want that entire intersection to be a point of arrival, a point of destination. And with that, we need to look at more than just what happens on one specific piece of property. We need to look at what's happening on all the properties in the neighborhood. And so we have the St. James parcel, and we have the Bonita 75 parcel. And one of the things that's interesting, this road that's here will go away as part of their approval. As a matter of fact, there's an easement across it that gets automatically vacated when they build the new access because they had to provide access for people back here. So there's this opportunity that has always been recognized that this interchange needs to be something more, it needs to be something special. Again, looking at this portion of their site plan, if you were to just simply push these buildings forward, you would achieve part of what the conversation has been about bringing things to the street and so forth. We'll come back to this in a second. The same way here, the St. James parcel has already amended, and they talk about it being 10 years old, but they actually came in and updated their master concept plan since then, so it's not exactly 10 years old. This is Ian Lockwood's concept that he had about how you could orient the
I'm going to
buildings.
object to the presentation of Mr. Lockwood.
I'm just stating where that drawing came from, the very top one. It came from him. Okay? So that came from him. But what I wanted to show you here is that buildings oriented and retail buildings oriented work very well. This building here is a Target on Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard in West Palm Beach. And that Target's a two-story Target building, parking underneath, up against the road. It's a very busy, highly used store, and you can't see the parking. People know it's there, and it's a very, very busy store. Over here, this is a picture of a portion of Palm Beach Lakes, PGA Boulevard in Palm Beach Gardens. And we'll see the next picture here in a second. I'll show this. As you get off the interstate, as you get off I-95 in the Gardens, you immediately go to an overpass that goes over alternate A1A. And with that overpass, you come into this area here of the Gardens. And what happens is that this is alternate A1A. It's a limited access road there. And what you have here is this. Actually, this isn't alternate A1A. I misspoke. This is the access that gets you to alternate A1A. But you have, so it acts like a major connector ramp. What you have here is a shopping center. This particular road is about the same distance Hunter's Ridge is. And as you go there, you'll see, if down in this picture, that has been controlled to a right in, right out. These buildings are up against the road. And this is here. Now, what I want to point out, this is about a 12-lane road. I would not call this a road that you're going to bike or walk on. But what happens, the sidewalks and the building placement and the landscaping present that you have arrived feeling, that point of place. That makes that statement that you're trying to make to that. Immediately, as you go a little bit further to the next driveway, which is this building here, all of a sudden it converts back into a more traditional setback, a more traditional parking being seen and so forth, because you're outside of that immediate sense of arrival at the interstate. These are some shots of that. And what you have here is, again, looking as you first enter, the buildings, the landscaping, and yes, buildings can be built without putting the back of house up against the road. Here is the tall office building that is on the corner at the intersection, after which it goes into the more typical setback scenario that we've talked about. Again, this was a concept that we received in the emails that was shown. And I don't necessarily agree 100% with his site plan, but I do agree with the concept. And let me try to verbalize the concept. If you take the buildings and you push them towards the right-of-way, remember that right-of-way is coming back at an angle. It's further back than the existing right-of-way. And there's been this conversation, well, it's DOT property. It's right-of-way. If it's DOT property, it's right-of-way. With that, you can create a space. They're not going to be way out of whack as far as lining up with the existing. You can create a sense of place and buildings and desirability. Now, one of the things, if you limit it to 50% of the frontage, being the buildings, that leaves 50% on the sides for other things, which includes parking, which includes a visual possibility to see some parking, see that there's people there. Those elements are still there, but you don't lose the opportunity to create this sense of place. So, again, the building orientation, Jackie had mentioned this in her previously. As you look in Burnwood, the orientation is such that it's not inconsistent with this as you drive away from the plan. The concept really is that you have created a sense of arrival, a sense that, wow, I am here and I want to stay here. I mean, think about what it is that communities do. Think about what sells homes. Think about GL Homes right now out west has just spent, I don't know how much money, over $1 million, building a grand entranceway into their new development. Why? Because it's a sense of place, it's a sense of arrival, it's a sense of desirability. And that's what we're really talking about here, is trying to create a sense of arrival, a sense of desirability, a sense of place. And that's really what we're talking about. Everybody wants every business to be successful. No one's here is trying to hurt business. But at the same point in time, we don't want business to hurt the city. The city will survive. There will be many businesses. Businesses come and go, and they're going to continue to come and go as technology changes, as the way transportation works changes. These things are going to happen. And a perfect example is I can now go online and do an order to Walmart, pull up and tell them I'm in the parking lot, they'll come put it in my car. Okay? Who thought that would happen just 5 years ago? But they have a sign in the store, oh, you don't have to come to the store now, we'll come put it in your car for you. Think about what Amazon is trying to do with the way they're changing technology. There's no doubt that over the years that these buildings will be repurposed and reused because technology will change. What we don't want to change is that sense of place, that sense of arrival, that sense of desirability. I mean, every successful city wants to have a sense of being desirable. And I think that that's what we're really trying to accomplish here. And now we get to transportation.
I have a couple
Yeah.
questions. Mr. Sweet, I brought my comprehensive plan with me for the city of Bonita, and I tried to listen to you and read fast. I didn't find any goals, policies, objectives on place of arrival, sense of arrival, or anything like that. Can you tell me what goal, policy, or objective you're relying on?
It's in the vision statement of the comprehensive plan.
So none of the goals. Well, here, can you tell me where that is in the vision statement?
Sure. Get it online. Here. To begin, the future plan zone says, Bonita Springs tomorrow, the vision.
I see that page.
Okay, and it says there's a great diversity in the backgrounds, ages, economic status, ethnic origins, and lifestyles of the citizens who live and work together while making Bonita Springs their home. Few of today's Bonita Springs residents were born here. And we'll come back to that. The great majority made a deliberate and life-altering choice to relocate here, and in most cases because the very specific things they liked about the community and when they came, and perhaps even more importantly, because what they saw and hoped Bonita Springs would continue or would change into the future. Being that the case, Bonita Springs is blessed with a very high percentage of citizens who hold strong and clear beliefs. Whoops. Sorry, hit the wrong button there. Yeah, that's what we have here, but she asked the question. Yeah. Over the course of several public workshops and community visiting sessions, a broad cross-section of the diverse population was given the opportunity to share and support the individual points of view. Certain paramount themes emerge as having a strong majority support in the groups. Of these important issues are the goals of the future, personal differences of circumstance amongst the participants was not as significant a force as the community of what brought them to this uniquely and pleasant location.
Okay,
It is very-
I've read the vision statement. You're submitting that we have to have liner buildings in order to be consistent with the City of Bonita Springs comp plan. And I'm asking you to tell me what policy, goal, or objective we're inconsistent with.
I'm saying that what we have is a vision here and in a PD.
But it has to be adopted
In a-
into the comprehensive plan, and what you just read was very nice, but it didn't say anything about building orientation. or
What
any-
it says, and we can read the whole thing if you want me to, but what it says specifically is that the city should adopt things that give a sense of place.
It doesn't say that.
I think it does. I mean,
Audrey?
Does it say, and I'm in the document right
Audrey,
now.
you can't answer for him. Let him answer the question.
How about if I take a copy of the document and make a couple copies for council, and they can read it themselves?
Okay.
And I'll make enough for everyone. Well, maybe not everyone, but.
because before you get to the goals, objectives, there's 5 paragraphs that are enumerated. And those 5 paragraphs that are enumerated talk about things that the city should attempt to do, including being a walkable city.
I'll have copies in a few minutes of the entire part of Bonita Springs Tomorrow, the vision, and just that one page. And I'll provide that to council, staff, and applicant.
Okay, so your whole testimony is based on those 2 pages? Is that your testimony?
My testimony is based upon good planning practices and interpreting what the vision that is in the comprehensive plan as it exists today. And I think it's clear that people don't want to live in an undesirable city,
No dispute whatsoever.
okay? I think it's clear that the city has the responsibility to make sure things that they approve meet the vision of the comprehensive plan. And I think that my statements do meet the vision of the comprehensive plan.
Okay.
If I may ask, and unless Mr. Arline objects, or, is our comp plan consistent with state statute for the Growth Management Act?
That's a legal question.
All right, if Mr. Arline would like to address it?
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought you were asking Jay.
I did, but if you have objection, if Mr. Arline can respond.
I don't know, I didn't hear the objection was what?
The discussion was, the testimony by Mr. Sweet indicates that he was asked by Ms. Montgomery whether or not there are specific goals, objectives, and policies related in the Bonita Springs Comprehensive Plan as to his testimony today. He cited the beginning of the comprehensive plan, which is the Bonita Vision, I believe it's cited tomorrow. And in his testimony, tomorrow the vision, that there were key factors that indicate similarity to what his testimony as far as walkable communities, now we say walkability, and announcements to travelers of city limits, et cetera. The question that I asked Mr. Sweet, and then Ms. Montgomery pointed out it should be answered by you, is whether or not the language within the Bonita Springs Tomorrow, the vision, is part of the comprehensive plan. I mean, obviously, it's in the document and something that can be relied upon by staff.
Yes, I believe it is. I mean, I think the comprehensive plan includes the goals, objectives, and policies, and the vision upon which those goals, objectives, and policies are based. So I think Mr. Sweet can testify on his professional opinion as to how that vision statement may or may not be implemented or achieved in this particular situation.
And Mr. Arline, this is Audrey Vance again, and I'm walking around the room, so bear with me when I move through here. I'm passing out right now a copy of Bonita Springs Tomorrow, the vision, to the council and also to the clerk to have that entered into the record. And Mr. Sweet, I believe you can continue proceeding, or do you want transportation next?
For the record, Jacqueline Genson. Next, I want to talk about access and transportation review, and a couple of these items came up during the zoning board hearing, and I do have our traffic engineer here if there are additional questions. But again, because of the area's proximity to the interstate and Bonita Beach Road being a Lee County-owned and maintained facility, this application was reviewed by FDOT and Lee County DOT. And mainly the big points to point out is that you'll see in the staff report and also in the conditions, I'm going to call it a warning, if you will, that that DOT retains the right to close the median at Hunters Ridge Boulevard and Bonita Beach Road. You'll see in the conditions from Lee County Department of Transportation a condition relative to proportionate fair share should that median close for the applicant to participate in a signal agreement. It's not set in stone where that would be. It's going to depend on a lot of traffic analysis, as the applicant has stated today, on U-turn movements and traffic patterns in the area to determine where the ultimate signal would be. But we anticipate it would be at Tradeway Drive, as indicated on the screen. And again, as the applicant has pointed out, and have pointed out their master concept plan, they are requesting access to 3 parcels, and we'll go ahead and get into those details next. The items that came up at the zoning board was the traffic impact statement methodology. As you may recall, a few months ago, staff did propose some amendments to the Land Development Code and the Administrative Code for traffic impact statements, because the codes that we are bound by now are old Lee County administrative codes, where I don't think it actually has changed since the mid-90s. And again, because the city is so different from the county and we really want to be in control of local issues, staff has proposed some changes to those documents. However, we went ahead and continued those items to a date certain, so they won't be brought before this board again until August, again in your city council capacity as a legislative body. But in terms of the zoning board inquiries, there was questions by several members of what growth rate was used to reflect seasonal conditions, vested rights. You have a lot of entitled properties that have either a zoning approval or what we call a master traffic impact statement, such as the Burnwood Park of Commerce does. And then out east, you have those communities that have development agreements where they are vested for traffic based on the commitments in those development agreements. So there was concerns whether or not those were taken into account in the traffic impact analysis. And then there was also discussion about what would be the impact in this area once Bella Logan comes through up to Bonita Beach Road, and we are then connected to Collier County. And again, with that, we're hoping it won't be too much of an impact, because we also anticipate that a lot of those trips from the eastern communities would commute south to Collier County for their goods and services as well. But I do have Tom Ross here if you have additional questions during question and answer for him to address those items. Coordination with Florida Department of Transportation. This was an item that came up by one of the zoning board members in terms of the long-range improvements for the interchange. And what I did is I contacted Public Works, because Matt Feeney, the Public Works Director, is on one of the committees for the Metropolitan Planning Organization. And he did verify with me that FDOT is planning what they call a bold landscape at this quadrant. So he wanted me to go ahead and share that information with you. I also spoke with Sarah Catala. She's a planner with Florida Department of Transportation that is involved with their long-range plan for the interchange. And what I did is I just took excerpts from her email and put them on the screen for you, just to let you know that this interchange is on their priority list for improvements. She anticipated that in 2035 that there would be plans for 10 laning the interchange. As you'll see some of their language, that they will use a context-sensitive approach that promotes health, safety, welfare, and economic viability, of course, considering the property owners in the quadrant for any of their future improvements to the interchange. They have been sent copies of the conditions. They have been sent Mr. Lockwood's site renderings of how we would like to go ahead and incorporate the pathways into their limited access areas. We have not got a definitive response from them. They do have a complete streets team on board that's new for the district, that can help the city as we move forward through our vision, because they will be one of the partners we need to partner with as we implement that vision. So depending how we go ahead and frame the condition today, FDOT could not commit to implementing some of the concepts that Mr. Lockwood has presented, but they do know that that's a priority of a lot of communities, and they will be sensitive to that. So they also wanted to let me know that in the next 12 to 14 months, they will be looking at another analysis to see what interim improvements they could make to the interchange. So they'll go ahead and keep us apprised on that. Access to Hunter's Ridge, this more so relates to the direct access to Parcel 1. And then we want to talk a little bit about the raised pedestrian crosswalk across Hunter's Ridge Boulevard. And the applicant is supportive of that. At least they have not objected to that condition for a raised pedestrian crossing across Hunter's Ridge Boulevard. But the direct access to Parcel 1 was a concern for staff at this level. We did not feel comfortable approving that at this time. And Hunter's Ridge Boulevard, while it's not identified as a collector on our future land use map series, on our transportation map series, based on the characteristics of the road and the uses around it, it does somewhat function as a minor collector. So if we went ahead and applied those separation policies to this road, it would require a deviation. But those are technical deviations that are more appropriately applied at time of development order when we actually know what the uses will be, and a further detailed traffic analysis with turn lane modeling and things of that nature, so we can really see if there's going to be an impact and safety concerns relative to a right in, right out, or a left out onto Hunter's Ridge Boulevard. So the applicant was comfortable with staff's recommendation to go ahead and evaluate that at time of local development order in accordance with Chapter 3. That was staff's proposed condition. However, the zoning board had safety concerns based on the distance and the current conditions of Hunter's Ridge Boulevard. So they recommended that no access be given at this time through this zoning ordinance. So there would be no ability for the applicant to request it at local development order. So staff maintains the same position that it could be reviewed at time of development order through Chapter 3, and a technical deviation could be requested, so we can truly evaluate safety concerns at that time. Connectivity, as we explained and the applicant did, they are proposing a series of interconnected internal bike paths and walkways throughout the project. They will be connecting to Bonita Beach Road. They are supportive of the city's vision to incorporate a separate bike facility and pedestrian walkway. How it is incorporated along the property is yet to be determined, because again, that's FDOT's limited access area, and they ultimately have input in decision-making authority on how that path can be connected. And we're hoping that they will buy into our vision and we can incorporate that. So we have that information there. Regarding the pay in lieu language for condition 3A, staff is supportive of that, and so is the Public Works Director, and that's actually what we're doing right now with a lot of our projects that are coming in for development order, where on our pedestrian bike plan update, there is future improvements that are planned, but it makes more sense for the city to go ahead and start collecting those funds to do them in series and capital improvements that are timed accordingly, instead of a developer doing it one piece at a time. So the direction from at least the Public Works standpoint is to go ahead and collect a fee in lieu. So staff is supportive of that condition, modification by the applicant. Deviations, the applicant went ahead and testified on that. Staff did support the deviation request based on the conditions that exist on the golf course. Staff is in agreement with the applicant's testimony today. I do have Stuart Smith, our engineer, here. If you have any other concerns that you would like him to address, we can go ahead and do that. But again, based on the current site conditions with the existing buffering and the fence that is in place, we agree that there are barriers in place to go ahead and protect from wayward carts and vehicles. Surrounding property compatibility, we already went over those, so I won't belabor those points unless you would like me to do so. But in terms of the site design, the applicant's using the preserve and water management area to buffer the golf course area and the residential community. We've put in a substantial amount of outdoor display conditions to help with the visual component that is a concern of this council. The line of sight exhibit, so we feel that the conditions are appropriate to address the compatibility concerns that would come up. Environmental review, there was a lot of discussion at the zoning board for exotic removal. There is a high amount of exotic vegetation within the site and even in the preserve area that is being presented as a preserve. And with that, the exotic removal will be done in phases. The upper story canopy of the pine trees would be preserved. It's the understory planting and the phasing of that planting that would really come into effect at time of local development order. And Mr. Kirby is here to explain that in more detail if you have questions on that. Again, with the engineering review, Mr. Smith in our office did review their water management permit and concept, and I do believe that the district actually issued the permit, because I did get notification. I wanted to make sure. They will provide additional water quality treatment. It's in an X zone. And then one of the zoning board members had a question on how the site drained, and since it does drain under the interstate and into the southwest quadrant, based on that zoning board member's involvement on a prior case, there was substantial flooding concerns in the southwest quadrant. But since then, Bonita Exchange has acquired the property that had the drainage concerns and the flooding, and that project has been issued a permit by the South Florida Water Management District. That permit has also been reviewed by our office, or in terms of the drainage system has, and we believe that those items have been addressed. Consistency with the Bonita plan, again, I won't go over all of these in detail, but we did find the request consistent with the comprehensive plan as it exists today, as it's adopted today. And the big item to go ahead and look at is the interchange commercial, because a lot of the uses that the applicant is requesting are those auto-centric uses that our current comprehensive plan allows today. However, again, through the vision statement in the comprehensive plan, through the plan development process, this council has the ability to place conditions to further ensure that this project is developed in a manner in which you want it to be, because it is one of our gateways of the city. Another policy I want to point out is the assisted living facility. This interchange commercial land use category does allow for multifamily at 10 units an acre. So the assisted living facility, through our density equivalent process, We did evaluate that. There is plenty of acreage for them to go ahead and propose the assisted living facility. And because of the type of development, we felt it was a allowable use. It was generally consistent with a multifamily use. So staff had no reservations with approving that use as a potential use if the hotel does not come through. Like public facilities for transportation, the bike pedestrian plan, those are all discussed in the staff report. I'd be happy to go into more detail if you'd like. Mr. Kirby explained there are some wetlands that are very small in nature, minor significance, and he can go into that detail as well if you have further questions. I can go over the recommended conditions of approval, but essentially, condition 1 is the intensity and density, and then the condition that ties the master concept plan to the zoning ordinance itself. Condition 2 is the schedule of uses, that's 2A. 2B is the property development regulations. And again, the zoning board recommended height only for 35 feet for parcels 1 through 3. The applicant has requested the 45 feet, so that's an item for you to discuss today. Condition 3 is the architectural. As we explained earlier, staff is recommending a modification to condition 3A, whereas after further review, originally we had a consideration to give you an option if you wanted to go ahead and truly hold them to lining the street with buildings and creating a sense of place, how we could go ahead and do that, or the option to continue the existing development pattern of more of a suburban context with parking in the front. But upon further analysis, staff is recommending that that condition be struck. But again, it's up to this board whether or not, how they want to see that vision for the rest of Bonita Beach Road going east out of the interstate. Another modification to B was relative to placement and landscaping, just because of the way Parcel 3 is oriented in relation to the Florida Department of Transportation parcel to the west. We are proposing no changes to C and D. Also, I'm sorry, D has a slight minor modification. Condition 4 in your draft ordinance is very extensive. That's our outdoor display conditions. The landscaping and buffering, because of our changes in condition 3, there's some slight changes to condition 5A, which is the buffering. So you'll see how we want certain accentuation for landscaping and architectural features. We went ahead and changed some language relative to parking areas that are visible from Bonita Beach Road and how those should be buffered. Condition 5B remains unchanged. Condition 6, again, goes into the transportation and the access to Parcel 1, where zoning board recommended that no direct access be given to Parcel 1. B, C, D, E, and F remain unchanged. Condition 7, there are slight changes based on our changes to condition 3 and how we would like the bikeways and pedestrian ways to be incorporated along Bonita Beach Road and Hunters Ridge Boulevard. The last part of that condition 7A is in regards to where the applicant had concern about an exaction. We're hoping that won't be the case, and FDOT will go ahead and work with the city and the applicant as a partner in achieving our vision. B and D remain unchanged. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14 remain unchanged. But again, if you would like me to go over those, I can go ahead and do that. It's your environmental, heritage trees, water quality, our stormwater changes, consistency with signage. We have some signage conditions. If a hotel is constructed on Parcel 6, we want to make sure that any lit signage is not facing the residential, so taking into considerations for that. Prohibition of loudspeakers, except in the case if there's an automobile service station or a bank with a drive-through or a gas station. We want to make sure that obviously they have speaker system capabilities. Our Florida Green Building Coalition and LEED standards is a general statement we have in all of our plan development conditions. So is our consistency with the Land Development Code. And 14 is, generally we always have this in all of our plan development application, except here we put an emphasis about the Bonita Beach Road Vision Plan. And then the findings as conditioned by staff, there's a 10-part criteria that we've reviewed, and based on those 10 criterion and based on staff's recommended conditions of approval, we recommended approval of the applicant's request. And members of staff and myself are available for additional questions.
Council? Pleasure. Questions? Amy?
I'm not quite sure what page 481 is on this, but it refers to deviation 1. It says staff is concerned that there may not be enough room for the lake bank slope, the walking path, and the landscape buffer in the 25-foot space allotted in the area. Was that resolved?
Is that in the transcript?
It's on page 481. 481. It's in the sufficiency response number 1, I think is what that is.
Let me get there real quick. For the record, Jacqueline Genson, Mike Kirby just came up and explained that both himself and Stuart Smith, our engineer, are comfortable with the cross-section as presented today. So yes, it has been addressed.
Okay, that's referring to the 50-foot, and according to where the water is, that's what you're talking about there? With the
The 41-foot, I believe, proposed by them was originally approved by the staff, and I still say it's fine.
Okay.
It's safe.
Okay. Amy, anything else?
No, not right now, I don't think.
Okay. Fred?
I've got a question, I think, for Jay. Jay, on the point you made, I think, was that the restaurants out by Beach Road, that if the way they are now, they would actually be farther back than the front line of the buildings on Burnwood. Is that what you said?
Correct.
How much farther back? I
I
mean,
think
roughly.
It roughly, I'm going to say, it depends which lots you're on, it's going to be somewhere between 20 and 50 feet based on their 60-foot setback.
Mm-hmm.
Because that comes back at that angle there.
Yeah.
And we didn't calculate it exactly. We can obviously do that, but yeah.
Okay. Good point. Jackie, what was the additional restrictions you wanted on outdoor displays?
If you, in your draft ordinance, there's condition 4. So if you can turn to page 7 of the entire packet, but it's page 414 of the proposed zoning ordinance, you'll see condition 4, outdoor display and sale of merchandise. And there are 13 sub-conditions relative to that. So those, we try to think of everything, and it's actually modeled after our downtown ordinance with some slight modifications because this is not a downtown. But again, going with those same themes of cleanliness, appearance, the amount of time that it's outdoors, because we know that's such a priority of this council. And again, because this property is bound by visibility from the interstate, visibility from Bonita Beach Road, Hunter's Ridge Boulevard, and then you have the golf course of Hunter Ridge Boulevard to the south. So there's definitely there's a lot of public view sheds that we're trying to protect. So that's why the conditions are so cumbersome, if you will. They're pretty substantial.
And I think Attorney Montgomery said those conditions were unlivable. What parts of what they asked for was totally unacceptable?
The tool design group conditions? Yes, sir.
On outside display?
Oh, no, we agree with those.
Oh, okay, fine.
Counsel?
Um,
Mike?
Mainly, what are the disagreements then?
The disagreements, oh,
Essentially, from what I understand,
go ahead.
okay. From what I understand from Jackie's presentation, they agree with us on the lake setback. They agree with us on the height, and they agree with us, not necessarily the zoning board, on the access to parcel 1 can be evaluated at the time of DO.
And they agree with the payment of the money for the bike path so they can do it as a whole.
Yes, if that's the condition that you would all go with. The only disagreement with staff that I'm hearing, and obviously you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, is the building placement, which I do have rebuttal for if you'd like to hear that.
Sure.
Yeah, and I'd like to ask more questions after the rebuttal.
Yeah, we disagree with the 3, 5, and 7 from the tool design group, those about last minute changes.
Yeah.
We agree with the original staff.
Can you pull up my PowerPoint presentation?
She has.
And so for access to, while they're doing this, access to parcel 1, you guys want direct access. Now, was that a right-in, right-out only, is what you
if
said?
look- Yeah, the staff had recommended that you not give essentially blanket approval and they get to look at it. And if you look at Jackie's graphic that she had, what she showed was the left out with a little yellow, thing for a crash. So we saw what she said and at the zoning board. That's why we're suggesting it should be limited to a right in, right out with the median, so you don't have that crash that she demonstrated. So we went a step further to ensure what she identified as a problem, we addressed.
And staff would still like to reserve that it be evaluated at time of development order, because we just don't know what use is going to be on that parcel, and if it has a heavy turning movement, we want to make sure there's adequate safe distance for a decel lane and things of that nature. So we're still not comfortable with recommending any access right now.
And we're okay with that. We understand they need to look at all what's there and what the trip counts are and that sort of thing.
You just don't want it off the table right now?
Correct.
Okay, so just in terms of reaction, I guess, to Jay's presentation, first off, there's nothing in the comp plan policies that requires buildings against the right-of-way. If that were the case, you'd have seen us here 2 weeks ago in opposition to the comp plan amendments. They were very general, and I think in the presentations that I've seen regarding implementation of the vision study, the consultant, Dr. Banyan, has been very clear that there are suburban areas and there are urban areas of Bonita Springs. And we need to look at those areas differently. One size does not fit all. And, I want to make that point very clear, because you can't take a planning principle and just indiscriminately apply it everywhere and think it's going to work. Our concern with this is not that, I don't recall ever saying it would look terrible. In fact, again, I proposed this type of thing for Corkscrew Road because at the time I had thought it would look nice. And there are some things about Corkscrew Road where it makes sense that I think do look very nice, regardless of functionality. But I go back to what I pointed out that McGarvey had stated. It looks nice, it's a great vision, but it doesn't function well. And so if you're trying to create an entryway feature, it's an incredibly punitive approach to creating an entryway feature for a developer. Jay also said that there are many ways to create entryway features. You could do it through landscaping, through signage, anything that screams you have arrived in Bonita Springs. It doesn't have to be through building placement. And in fact, staff has a condition saying if you do the 2 rows of parking in front of your building, then you have to enhance your landscaping. So by its very nature, if we agree with staff's condition that they originally put, and that's in your ordinance, we will be creating more of an entryway feature because we will be enhancing the landscaping over and above what you currently have, over and above what Burnwood is required to do, over and above what St. James PUD to the north is required to do. We are going to have a stronger landscape criteria as an entryway feature into the city. Again, you go back to what is this trying to achieve? We're not creating the main street that one page of the vision asked for. I didn't hear that in any argument by staff. We're now just trying to create an entryway feature, but there's a way to do that without severely limiting the viability of retail at this site. I guess the last thing I'll say is you can design this like Palm Beach Lakes. This is Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard in Palm Beach County. The difference between this location and Palm Beach Lakes and even PGA Boulevard, the places that Jay was talking about, is this is the heart of the urban area in Palm Beach County, a county that's more than double the population of Lee County, a county that West Palm Beach is the county seat for a county that's double the population of Lee County. And you're trying to apply, again, land use form along 95 that runs through the most urbanized areas of that county. It's totally distinct from the character of I-75, which in many parts along I-75 corridor acts as an urban growth boundary, or an area where once you're east of I-75, you have less density and less intensity. Well, when you're west and east of Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard, you start getting buildings like this, more than double the height of the buildings that we're asking for that you see anywhere in the city of Bonita Springs. This is Palm Beach Lakes Boulevard. We agree. A sidewalk like this, that's beautiful, and that's the vision that we agree with in the Bonita Beach Road corridor. You want to have comfortable bicycle ways, sidewalks. We don't agree that office buildings like this or that this interchange here has any applicability. Again, Palm Beach International Airport is just south of it's a totally different type of character for the area than what we're talking about here. We're comfortable being the gateway. We've talked about that in our presentation. We're comfortable with the enhanced architecturals. We're comfortable looking at all of that. We're comfortable with the outdoor display because we know it's a gateway. We understand all of that. And we're even comfortable with the enhanced landscaping to create that gateway that you guys are looking for. What we're not comfortable with is a punitive condition that really impacts the viability of the site. Everything else we're in agreement with.
So mainly it's just having the buildings right up along the
Yeah,
right away.
if you look at the ordinance, the draft ordinance, and essentially if you look at the conditions I passed out, they mirror the draft ordinance. In condition 3A, the only addition we made is the fee in lieu, so we could pay for the reconstruction of those bikeways and pedestrian ways within Bonita Beach Road, so that the city can get that done.
Now, what we passed out was staff's condition with the modifications we discussed, but we did not include the Ian Lockwood changes that we can't live with.
Council, any other questions? Amy?
The footprint that you have here is just a suggestion, right? I mean, it's not you're not compelled to put it right where you have it now. It depends on what kind of organizations you get coming in here. Isn't that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And the way this is written, that there is parking on the Bonita Beach Road side of this. Does that represent like 2 rows of parking, or can you tell from?
The condition that we're fine with in the draft ordinance is a maximum of 2 rows of parking.
All right, but the picture here is that for 2 rows of parking, or is that for more than 2 rows of parking? Do you know? No,
We designed it for 2 rows of parking, one in front of the building, one against the property.
Okay. And my concern is more with what uses were going into those three areas there, 1, 2, and 3. You know, could we have like 3 gas stations or something? And I think that would, if there were a commitment, or if we could somehow have a commitment by the applicant that they would be place-setting buildings, then I don't think whether we have the buildings up against the right-of-way or not is important. What the nature of those buildings, I think, is more important than what we're talking about here. And I think there are different uses there. Maybe we should just review that to make certain that those are the kinds of things we want there, because we do want it to be a signature place. We've been talking about that ever since I've been on the council for a year.
Yeah, we're trying to be consistent with the comp plan that says we're in an interchange land use category, and this is the place where we're going to meet the needs of the traveling public, again, so they don't have to, if they don't want to, come into your town.
I understand that, but you even but because you are right against the interchange there, and that is a visual thing, I mean, I could, if you had a nice office building on the corner one, I think that would look good going out there. So I don't know what you have in plans there. But you'd have to come in through Hunter Ridge Court to get into any of these parcels, right? There wouldn't be any entrance there. So the more screening you have along the Bonita Beach Road, the better off that would be.
And that
So
was-
if you put a gas station, you still have to come in off of Hunter Ridge Road into your first entryway.
That's correct. And that's why we have that condition for additional landscape buffering along Bonita Beach Road to create that sense of place. So there are 2 things going on that I think address your concern. One is, for the most part, architecturals, if you have a nice architectural on your building, you really, it's of less consequence what happens inside that building. So, you know, a great example of that is the extra space storage on US 41.
Right.
I mean, you would never be able to guess that was a mini storage facility. It's beautiful. And so what we tried to do, and staff had flagged this early on in the zoning, was architecturals are important. So we came up with the architectural treatments in a pattern book type exhibit that would address those types of concerns. And then we're fine with the condition that we provide enhanced landscaping along Bonita Beach Road, so you get that entryway feature. So you have almost a dual protection to address that concern. In addition, we did limit gas stations, so you couldn't have 3 along the road. From a marketing standpoint, you couldn't have that anyways, but we have, through architecturals and landscaping, I think, addressed those concerns.
And the other thing is, it seems to me that it's likely we're going to have a service station in one of those places. But I could be wrong, I'm not a planner, but if you are going to accommodate the needs of the traveling public, so then I would be more concerned about, landscaping along Hunter Ridge Boulevard for those residents there who would enter along there, so they wouldn't have to look at a service station if it happened to be on that first property. So I think I don't know what kind of buffering is approved there along Hunter Ridge Boulevard.
Well, if you look at the architectural condition in 3B, it says structures visible from any residentially zoned property, Bonita Beach Road, Hunters Ridge Boulevard, and Interstate 75 must meet primary facade standards. So
Right, so the architectural, so if you had a service station, it would have to meet some certain architectural things. How about the landscape buffering along there?
We're looking that up now, but I believe your code specific to gas stations, you do have a code specific to gas stations.
Fred?
Well, I want to beg to differ on a couple points. You know, it does make a heck of a lot of difference what the use is, because a gas station, you're going to have the big aircraft carrier canopy, and that is not that's not a work of beautiful architecture. I haven't seen one yet that looked worth a. I agree with Amy, and I'm very concerned about what was advertised to originally be 3 fast food restaurants. And it's the old bubble game. And I'm not happy about that part.
The old what?
Let me
the
just
old
say
what,
this.
Fred?
The landscaping that we have to shield gas stations is not very effective. Now, having said...
Are you saying the old bait and switch? Is that what you're trying to...
Well, no, all the discussions and presentations have been 3 restaurants,
Right.
a retail building, an office building, a hotel, or assisted living of 145
right.
beds. And that's really not what this is turning out to be. And I'm somewhat disappointed about that.
Yep. Just wanted to clarify. Thank you.
Yeah. One other point I want to make, I believe that the area that McGarvey's talking about is the development up the Lowe's store, the buildings that front out on Corkscrew Road and also Imperial. Is that right?
well, the ones certainly at Lowe's, those out parcels don't function very well, and I know that Kite Realty's had a terrible time trying to...
Well, yeah, I was going to point, and I'm not as concerned about this. The huge difference would have been if those buildings had been moved a little more closer to Beach Road. You were still going to have, unlike those buildings up at Corkscrew, those are a continuous row of buildings. There's no parking between them, which is part of your plan. So your plan in that would not be the same, if you follow.
Well, that's correct, but the
Yeah.
tool design group condition would create the Lowe's situation. We're trying to avoid that because we know that doesn't work.
Well, yeah, but even if you moved them up, you would still have the space between the buildings.
No, but Lowe's, I did the zoning on the Lowe's property as well. The Lowe's property actually does allow parking on the side. And so if you look at the restaurant that's developed there now, the parking is on the side of that restaurant, and you could see the other out parcels are vacant. And I mean, I did that zoning in 2002, I think. So it's it just.
Is there any way we could avoid having some of these extreme uses on those 3 out there? I mean, that's literally the gateway from that south exit if you go eastbound. And I understand that we want to have stuff that's compatible for people that are traveling, and that's what makes those parcels marketable, but would seem...
Well, I think the way it's designed, and I'm not the planner, but I think the uses that are going to appeal to the traveling public primarily are the parcels 1, 2, and 3. The back parcels are your office, your hotel, and, different kind of retail.
And if I may, for the record, Jacqueline Genson, our staff's recommended changes to condition 3 We're not saying that they can't have parking in the right of way. What we're asking for or proposing is that at least 50% of the facade is oriented to the street. So parking can be in the remaining 50%.
I'm more concerned about what the uses are, not the parking and not how close it is to Beach Road.
Right.
Yeah. And I would like to think that a lot of council would be, because that is going to be one of your impressions if you come off that south exit ramp and northbound exit ramp and turn to the east. Or even if you happen to come up that way and then turn downtown, you're still going to see all that stuff. But
I have a suggestion. The concern that I heard about the function of uses, and the only...
Can't hear you.
What I had heard and what I had stated before was almost without exception, if you design a building well, what happens internally is of less consequence. You are correct. A gas station is very different than that, because you have gas pumps out front and a canopy. We can live with restricting a gas station to parcel one only on parcel one. Other than that, I'm not sure what other uses. We've already dealt with outdoor display. We've put severe restrictions on that, greater than I've seen anywhere in the county, or anywhere else I've worked for that matter. We've put restrictions on outdoor display. We've added additional landscaping. We've committed to enhancing architecturals. I'm not sure what else we could do, but we are willing to restrict the gas station so you don't have multiple gas stations there, because that clearly is a use that has an additional type of architectural feature out front.
Thank you. Amy?
Just a question following up on that. How they would have to come down Hunter Ridge Boulevard and then take a right into the, whatever that internal street is, and then take a right into that parcel one? Is that what you're saying? That's how you would accomplish that?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And would there be any special landscaping that's required along the Hunter Ridge Boulevard area?
Yes,
I know you have it
Councilmember.
along the Bonita Beach Road.
Correct. We have additional supplemental regulations for what we call automobile service stations. So we do have enhanced right-of-way buffer landscape requirements. So we have so when it's right-of-way adjacent to an external development, so in this case would be Bonita Beach Road and Hunters Ridge Boulevard, the development would have a landscape buffer easement that is at least minimum of 25 feet in width.
Okay, and then we'd have special
Correct.
planting in there.
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
And then how about signage? Where would the signage be? On Bonita Beach Road? How would that work?
They could do signage on Bonita Beach Road or one on Hunters Ridge Boulevard. It would be our monument-style signage that's permitted throughout the county.
But it wouldn't be like a
Oh my
tall
goodness, I'm so
sign that you
sorry.
could see from 75, or no?
No, but we do have the interchange signage, but for that quadrant, that sign is already allocated to the Burnwood Park of Commerce. So it would be our monument-style signs, which I'll have to look to Jay. I think it's a 7 by 12 sign with 25% architectural detail, no LED lights.
And we're even fine with putting in a condition that states that the sign will be architecturally compatible with the building.
Well, that sounds good to me.
Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that offer.
could we put in a condition if it goes that...
Fred, go ahead and speak
that
into
the,
the...
Right here.
Fred,
microphone.
speak into the microphone,
Oh.
please.
Yeah, could we put in a condition that if a gas station went on parcel one, that its canopy would be paralleling Beach Road as opposed to Hunters Ridge Boulevard? That would be more acceptable. Okay.
Mike?
Well, if we're done, I'd make a motion to accept the applicant proposed revisions with the couple changes to, if there's a service station on one only.
And then the no open burning.
Yeah, and
the
then
other
no open
ones-
burning.
And
I was gonna say, yeah, let's make sure we're clear on.
advocating
Yeah.
tree
Does
wells.
someone have a list of what we said?
I think that would be Councilman Forbes' changes on the outdoor display for, or elimination of the Group 2 auto, and it would include the sign being architecturally compatible with the building, and it would include the canopy being parallel with Bonita Beach and not Hunter's Ridge Boulevard.
Okay, Audrey?
Audrey?
Thank you. I just want to make sure, because there's also staff proposed changes to conditions 3, 5, and 7. Staff, and I don't know if what you're saying is going with the applicant, if that's inconsistent or consistent.
The motion was to go with the applicant's changes.
So the applicant's changes along with, as Neil mentioned, automotive repair and service, Group 1 and 2, but Group 2 would be limited to diesels and storage indoor only. Okay. Self-service fuel pump would now be limited to Parcel 1. Not put in staff revisions to 3, 4, 5, and 7.
Orientation of the canopy.
And I have that as a separate standalone condition.
Yeah, Audrey, the gas station's on Parcel 1, but don't forget that the canopy has to be parallel to Bonita Beach Road.
Yes, that's going to be a separate
Okay.
side condition. It doesn't belong in a schedule of use.
Okay.
So that'll be, I'm probably putting it as condition 12 and then moving, or, I'm sorry, condition 13 and then moving 14, or the next two being 14 and 15. Okay.
That's my motion.
And that eliminated the auto body shop repair too, right?
Yes.
Right. So Group 1 and 2, 2 is the one that has the very aggressive uses, and that would be limited. Still allow diesel repair, and it would allow tire shops.
Right. And then advocating tree wells where possible.
Tree wells.
Saving the trees.
What's that, Fred?
Yeah.
Advocating tree wells. In other words, preserving those trees that are decent, good trees that are not in the way of a building, a parking lot, or a driveway.
The applicant still has to go through not only landscape plans, they also have to turn in to tree advisory board for any historic or any trees that are designated.
Yeah, but a little bird whispered in my ear, and I'm the liaison, that if we just do that, a lot of the good trees in there will not be big enough to meet the you have to save it. So I'm just saying we would like an effort made there. I'm not even saying you have to, just make an effort to save as many trees as you can that are reasonable in size.
May I suggest something? Mike Kirby, environmental specialist. The heritage tree survey hasn't been done yet, so when they do the heritage tree survey, we could set a limit on the size of trees at, say, 10 inches and above
Yeah.
in these areas, and then judgments will be made at the development order stage if they're out of the building footprint, that, efforts be made to
Yeah,
preserve
that's fine.
these.
Good.
Amended to add that.
Second.
So there's been a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman DeWitt,
Aye.
Mayor Simmons,
Aye.
Councilman Gibson.
Aye.
Councilman Forbes,
Aye.
Councilwoman Karumba.
Aye.
Thank you very much for your patience. I know it was long.
Okay.
It's the only way we work.
Approval of the minutes.
I so move.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Mayor Simmons,
Aye.
Councilman Gibson,
Aye.
Councilman Forbes,
Aye.
Councilwoman Karumba,
Aye.
Councilman DeWitt.
Aye.
Okay. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Oh, wait, we missed Matt's thing.
I have a 1:30 meeting, so I gotta get home and get
I have
some.
to run to
We missed
Ave Maria.
YMCA. We missed everything.
Yeah, I know, YMCA was
You
new.
did a good job.